All right, we're live. Hello, everybody. Joanna here from Joanna Reads. Welcome to the Why Read discussion series, episode number 26, with my lovely guests, Becca and the Books and Gavin Reads It All. I was just talking with both of them beforehand because they've had channels for much longer than I have. I've followed them since before I had a channel. And so it's like being here in my mind, for me personally, these are like OG booktubers. So I'm so
Wow.
honored and excited to talk with both of them today. And on this
You
It's so
discussion
funny.
series,
That's
yeah,
so funny.
go
So I was just gonna say that's
you
so
you
funny you
flatter
think
us.
that because I yeah, you are just doing the most. Thank you.
ahead. Thank you. Yeah. Just so excited to be here with both of you. I know we were talking about how BookTube's been around for a long time, and I'm sure we'll get into some fun BookTube history today with both of these channels with Becca and Gavin today. But we always have to start with the first question on this discussion series, which is the why read. And I always bring up this question again as not necessarily, it depends on how you want to interpret it. You can answer it any way you want. It's not necessarily what made you fall in love with reading or your origins in reading, though you can go that direction if you want. It's more like in this busy time when everything's competing for our attention, whether it's a show, a movie, a video game, or just some other pastime or hobby, what inspires you to pick up a book than anything else? So we'll go ahead and start with Becca. What is inspiring you to pick up a book these days? Why read?
I think for me, I was raised by older parents to start off with, so I was always told like, don't spend all your time on the internet, don't spend all your time doing this, like do activities that aren't electronic essentially, which is how I like fell in love with reading. But now that I spend so much time on the internet, that I spend so much time on social media, I find reading is important because it's a lot more intentional than like watching TV or playing a video game. Like you actively have to pay attention more when you're reading. And for me, I like to do it because I like to consciously try and minimize my time being distracted by everything the world has to offer. And so things like reading, jigsaw puzzles, listening to records, and like doing something crafty is needed to get yourself away from like the busyness of the world, because we just absorb too much information these days and it's not healthy. So yes, it's a break from the busyness of 2024 for me, really.
Ah,
Yeah,
that's such a good
that's
answer.
I was gonna say I don't think I have as good an answer because my honestly I just why not read? I feel like there are more reasons like these days, especially since you keep saying about all like these different hobbies and different things that can distract us and try and take our attention away. And it's so funny because I'm the total opposite now than what I was as a child, because I did used to love reading, but they would have to be like really small books, like Goosebumps and things like that. I would devour, but anything like longer than 100 pages, my attention span would just not take it in. But nowadays, I'm like, this is all I kind of want to do. Like, all I want to do is like read. It's the main constant in my life. Everything else changes. I have so many different interests, but they just like change so much. Like one day I'll feel like journaling and like doing stuff like that, or another day I might feel like doing like Becca puzzles and games, or like going on a CSI course because just randomly I think it's interesting. But yeah, I reading is the only thing I just want to do. Like it's which is I can't even really explain why. It's just it's the best. I love being transported. I love all of the different stories that we can possibly read in different places. It's just so good. I love it.
Ah, I love that too. And I think with both of your channels, something that comes to mind is how both of you seem so great at intentionally making reading fun as well. Because I'm
Mhm.
thinking back like on your vlogs and like Gavin, I was watching after your Lord of the Rings vlog, you had a bunch of Legos. And then
Oh, yeah.
Becca, you have your Bookopoly, which we should talk
Mhm.
Mhm.
about. So it's
Yeah.
kind of nice too that even though this is a quiet activity and it's something, as you were saying, Becca, that maybe you were encouraged to spend time doing, that it does initially take an investment of time and effort, I think, to get into reading. And then once you're hooked, it's like life-changing in a way, but
Yeah.
it can also be really fun too, and I love that inspiration in both of your videos too, in both of your channels. But yeah, I would love to ask, Becca about the Bookopoly thing because I know that that's been a huge part of your channel. Can you tell
Yeah.
us about the inspiration behind that?
So was it 2018 or 19 when I started? I think it must have been 19. But I was inspired by Cody, of course, from Cody's Book Corner, who did like the Wheel of TBR. And I was
Okay.
thinking about how I could make a TBR that is a game. And I always loved readathons. I still love readathons. I love having a prompt. And I think that is because I'm such a terrible decision maker. Like if you leave me to my own devices, I will not do anything at all. Like if I don't have some sort of TBR, some sort of goal, I'm not reading. So that was why I wanted to do a TBR game. And then my favorite board game is Monopoly. So I have like I think at least 15 different Monopoly sets, and I could tell you like every square on the Monopoly board, like where they are, because I just used to play it so much when I was younger. So yeah, that's why I decided to go with Monopoly.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love that.
can I
Go
just
ahead,
like
yeah,
jump in and say
please do.
the Bookopoly was one of the reasons why I even started BookTube in the first place. Like it was,
Oh,
you
amazing.
know, because I was a silent BookTube watcher for such a long time. Like Jesse the Reader, Read by Zoe, and like everyone who a Clockwork Reader. I love them so much. And then I fell out of BookTube when I went to uni, and then when I came back, it was around about the time Becca was doing Bookopoly. So I was watching it was maybe like the February or the March one. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I don't know why that does that like so randomly. It just I didn't mean that. But it was so much fun to see reading become fun again because uni just zapped out all of the fun for me. So I saw Becca's Bookopoli and I wanted to make my own board and pick my own reads. And at the same time, too, G from Book Roast was doing the Magical Readathon. And I was like, there's so much going on in this community that was just really like I love reading and stuff, but like sometimes it can be very isolating and very like it's like a lone path sometimes. But I was like, wow, this community is bustling yet again. So I decided that's why I wanted to start a booktube channel because there was just so much fun to be had, and I just loved it so much. But yeah,
Gav's
I wanted to
Aw,
jump in and say my little story on that because it was
Gav's
inspiring.
Bookopoly was
mhm.
very short lived, but it did have a small
Oh,
appearance.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, this is a
it did.
conversation, so you feel free to interrupt with anything that you have to share because I love
I,
hearing this
I,
stuff. It's fascinating.
I was
Yeah.
it feels a little bit embarrassing now because I thought I could do Bookopoly justice, and I did do it for about like 2 months or something. Like the first 2 months I was on BookTube, and then I was like, you know what, this is too much for me. Like I can't do it. It's too powerful, Becca. Take it. You know what I mean?
I
But it
mean,
was still
Bookopoly is an entity in herself. She's too powerful for me now, even I don't really do Bookopoly anymore.
yeah, very true. It's like it took a life of its own, and I love the fact that along with like Cody and Becca, I do feel like a lot of TBR games and stuff like that just really paved the way for a lot of like say I still feel like a newbie, Joanna. I know you're saying like I'm one of the OGs, but
You
I
are.
I haven't even I haven't even done it for 5 years yet. Like it's my 5 year anniversary in April, and even that still feels like it's too recent. So I attribute like a lot to 2019. I think 2019 booktube was like a thing in itself, and it's so interesting to go year by year on booktube just to see the kind of shifts in trends and what was popular back then versus what's popular
Mhm.
now. And it's so interesting. I really do feel like booktube is such a vast place, and it's wild. It's so wild.
Yeah. That's funny. I think that's around the time I found out about BookTube was 2019. So,
Mhm.
really
Mm.
interesting kind of history there.
I'm not sure what it was. I'm not sure what it was in 2019 that really because I know like with 2020 a lot of people were home and that's how
Mhm.
people found like BookTube. I know I get a lot of people saying that it was that time when they discovered me as well. So yeah, 2019. I don't know what it was about that year really. Obviously, I know for me it was like the readathons and the TBR games that got me into it, but I can't really tell you of any other reason why 2019 seems to be the year of like me and you, Joanna. Like it was a good
Yeah.
year for us to start.
See, I remember distinctly why I like how I found BookTube, and that was because I searched a book review of a book and YouTube came up, and that was like the first I'd ever heard of BookTube. And then from there I found Ali from Hardback Hoarder. And then I just started making tag videos, and then I don't even do tag videos anymore. They don't really exist. And they were in 2017 and 18. That was like the equivalent of a TBR game, was to do tag Tuesdays. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
wild how things have changed. It's interesting being on the platform so long and seeing so many trends like come and go. Because in the minute we're in the era of the lifestyle vlog.
Oh
Is where
yeah,
That's
we
what it
want.
is. I wanted
Yeah.
to find out what you all thought about what's trending right now. Yeah, so you would say lifestyle?
I would say so. I would say like really long videos as well have become quite
Nice.
prominent in live shows, like podcasts. Like I love listening to like the Fantasy Notebook. I love like his Chatting with the Nuts series, and I love like obviously why read. But I feel like live shows, podcasts, stuff like that have been like really reading sprints. Reading sprints are still quite popular too. But lifestyle vlogs is definitely up there because I see a lot of, well, maybe not a lot of, but like quite a few OG booktubers who have moved to doing like lifestyle stuff more than book content, or at least trying to blend the two together. And what I love about booktubers, and especially with books, you can do anything with it. You know, like you can base so much around that and in theme around that too. It's a very versatile kind of hobby to have and do videos about, which is why I
Mhm.
love. I hate being like pigeonholed into one specific very little niche. I just feel like we have too much variety on booktube and too many things in books to kind of hold us in that one place. But yeah, sorry, I went off on a little bit of a tangent, but yeah, lifestyle vlogs. That's what's pretty popular right now, and very long videos too.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't
Yeah.
had a video under no, over an hour that's flopped. Like every video I post that's over an hour does really well.
Really?
It's the YouTube
Wow.
algorithm. As soon as that watch time goes up and they say, "Oh, yeah, I want," well, YouTube goes, "Yeah, I want people to be watching YouTube for longer." So I feel like having the longer videos, really, keeping people in their seats watching is what YouTube is like looking out for right now. And yeah, I love doing feature length movies. I love doing videos that last an hour to 7 hours long if need be. You just never know. You never know
I
what
do
people
think
want to
Yeah.
it's
watch.
interesting as well because it's the direct opposite of what TikTok is doing. So TikTok wants
Mm,
you to consume as much content as quickly as possible, and YouTube
mhm.
wants to keep you watching the same creator for as long as possible, which is something that I find I really like it actually because I feel like, as I was saying at the beginning about why I read, I feel like being surrounded by so much information and like content like TikTok is actively shortening people's attention spans.
Mm.
So I'm happy that YouTube is actually promoting long form content and not going down the route of Instagram and just promoting really short videos. Like,
Yeah. I
yeah.
agree. And especially since reading and like reading books is something that you do for a long period of time. So like trying to give content that is just like short and snappy, I guess can be a nice little change from what we do and like how we're reading. But I feel like we love immersing ourselves in these worlds with these books, and we will spend hours, days, weeks reading the same book until we finish it. So with me and content, like I can't do TikTok. I don't know if maybe it's just like before my time or whatever, but I can't do it. I can't do TikTok. I can't even make TikTok videos. But YouTube is a totally different thing in itself. I love long form stuff. I love watching things for longer. Yeah, I would rather watch, like, for example, I'd rather watch back in the day when primetime television, like Desperate Housewives and Lost and Buffy and Charmed, and all of that was like hundreds upon hundreds of episodes. I love that. And seasons were like 22 to 24 episodes long. But now seasons are like 4 episodes, and
I
shows
have
only
to
have like
like the thought of watching a 22 episode season makes me want to die a little bit these days. Like I can't do it. Because think about it,
No.
how much filler were we watching because they had to be 22
True.
episodes?
True. Like Buffy and Charmed. I'm currently rewatching Charmed, which is my favorite TV show of all time. And the
No
amount of
way.
episodes, yeah, I love it so much. It's my favorite. But the amount of episodes that have nothing to do with the main story, is like, I think it's 70% filler, 30% actual narrative. And yeah, I get it, but like, there's nothing better than watching like Gilmore Girls for like months on end. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's like
Yeah.
you kind of want to have those feelings and those vibes again. So a lot of people these days, I was just using TV shows as an example. People, yeah, I guess people just want to watch things for a shorter amount of time, and I can't do that. I can't change who I am for the
Yeah.
internet.
Yeah, it's interesting because I started this discussion series around the time when YouTube started promoting shorts, and
Mm,
it seemed like we were getting the message, like, "You're gonna get more attention. We're going to start monetizing shorts, that kind of thing." And I just knew that was never the kind of content, at least at that point. I never say never to anything, but at that time I was like, that's just not where I'm pulled right now. I love this long form kind of discussion format.
mm.
And at the time, I got so many people commenting in the chat and on my videos saying, we love long form content. We're readers. Maybe that's the difference. I don't know. But yeah, I got a lot of support to continue with longer form content. And I personally think I enjoy that. I mean, I enjoy that content as well. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
it's the engagement of just like I love discussions like this where you can just talk about anything and everything. And I love doing videos that, yeah, are maybe a little bit too long. I just uploaded one that's nearly 2 hours long talking about Spy Family, but that's
Oh
because I
yeah.
want to talk about everything. I want to talk about everything. I want to go into everything, discover everything about it, because yeah, you can't do that when there is only a 10-second, 20-second, maybe up to 1 minute thing. It's like I want more. I want to have more of a conversation. I want to engage a little bit more with the text and in the people who are talking. I can't get enough. It's why whenever I subscribe to someone, I constantly watch them for years and years and years, because I just want to know what they're thinking. I want to know what they're reading. I want their opinions. I want to know what they love and dislike. And it's just something that you can't really get from things that are a little bit too short. And yeah, same, Autumn. I have booktube, like I have
Yeah.
YouTube on my
Same.
TV, and sometimes I'll just like have it on in the background. It's great.
I
Yeah.
feel like I've never been concise in my life, so I could not do TikTok or shorts. It's not for me. I feel like I'm very much suited to long form content.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, and
actually,
I know YouTube is doing that, but
I've always been impressed though, Becca, like with your wrap ups, like how
mm,
well you can describe a book, like in a
Mm.
fairly concise way, actually. I'm like,
yeah,
wow, like that's a skill I've always appreciated and something that I've tried to like
Thank
build
you.
since starting a channel. But yeah, I've always appreciated the way you've been
same,
able to do that. Like,
I
wow,
do
really
get a
same.
lot of compliments on that, and I could not tell you how I do it. I just could not. It's just how I do it. I guess yeah. I'm glad
Is
someone
it
appreciate it.
is it the way that you engage with the book? Like, because I feel like whenever you're reading, I think you throw everything into it. Like you pay 100% attention. Whereas
Oh,
sometimes I
until I
do find
don't
myself
though.
drifting.
Until I decide that I don't care, and then I literally do
Mm,
not care. Like the second I decide I don't
yeah.
care, I'm not retaining a single bit of information.
You're still doing a good job at it though. I'm like, teach me
yeah.
your ways.
Yeah, I agree. I think you really are super talented at it, Becca. And Gavin, oh my gosh, your Lord of the Rings vlog. I have to shout that out, everybody, because I know a lot of people who watch my channel read a lot of epic fantasy and love Lord of the Rings. Gavin's Lord of the
Yeah.
Rings vlog at the Shire is
Mm,
it was like a movie. It was amazing. And you even did some acting and some effects. and
I did.
it was
I
just
did.
so
I
cozy.
did.
Melissa, how
All
did
without
that come
green screen
about?
as well. Oh, well,
Yeah.
so I love. Okay, I'm glad you asked, because one, actually, I got a comment about a week or so ago, and I have to thank you, Joanna, because they said, "Oh, I saw Joanna talk about your Lord of the Rings vlog on one of her live shows, and I thought I would check it out." And I was like, I need to remember to thank Joanna for that, because
Aw.
that was so lovely. But honestly, I probably peaked with that vlog because I put everything into it. I loved it so much. But I love doing things where I can immerse myself in not just the book, but the vibe of the book, the atmosphere of the book. So, like for example, I love going to scary locations as well to read horror books sometimes and get a little bit more like from my reading experience than just reading. And I also want the people who watch my videos to feel that as well. So I think it was about a year ago actually when I first saw it pop up, and the Shire House was in the UK, and they had a deal on at the time, but I couldn't do it because it was too expensive. But months and months and months later, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to book it. I'm going to go along for the ride. I've only ever read Lord of the Rings once. And it was literally the month before I joined BookTube. And I really enjoyed it. But I wanted to reread it. And I was like, how can I reread it but make it better? I know I will take myself to the Shire and I will
Mm.
spend a week there, and I will reread it. I'll just do it. And yeah, I just love being able to not just experience it for myself, but allow my viewers to experience it too. So yeah, it's thank you so much, because I love that vlog so much. It's probably my magnum opus. I'll probably never ever get to that level ever again. And I know it's
Not your
probably
magnum
really,
opus.
yeah, I know, right?
I
It's
thought
like
they were all
it's so
magnum opuses.
Okay, so I have a lovely viewer who says every single video of mine is a magnum opus. I'm like, I love you, thank you so much. But like,
That's not how magnum opuses work.
yeah, and I not every video I do is that good. Let's be honest, it's really not. But I loved doing the Shire, and I would recommend going. Whoever loves Lord of the Rings and they can go, please do it. It was so good. Yeah, I love themed vlogs. I love travel, and it was just great. And also I'm trying to be a little bit more adult in trying to read things that are like adult fantasies, and get a little bit out of my comfort zone a little bit, because I do flip flop between genres and age ranges and everything on BookTube. And so I want to be an adult again. I want to feel grown up. So yeah, I want to get more into adult fantasy. And that's what I've been doing the past few months. I've been watching like you and Philip and Jimmy, obviously Murphy. I've known Murphy for years, and I watch Murphy's fantasy videos. And yeah, obviously Becca as well. Like Becca's my twin essentially. So but
Mm,
I need
close.
to feel like I'm getting back into that, because I'm a chameleon. I change so often and I start confusing myself.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that because I actually just read a middle grade book recently, and I saw it was on your TBR. I don't know if you already read it, but I read this Japanese one
Ah,
called
Is that
Lonely
middle
Castle.
grade? I have that. I didn't know
It
it
is
was
middle
middle
grade.
grade.
Okay, it's
Oh,
middle grade, but here's the thing. I am so glad I knew it was middle grade going in, because I found out about this, I think, because a friend of mine read it last year, and she said she
mm,
didn't realize it was middle grade, and it ended up
mm.
messing with her expectations. She didn't like it as much.
I I bought that from the adult fantasy section, so I also did.
Really?
Well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, here's the thing. The back of the book, and I did rant about this to Murphy because she just did that video about blurbs. And so,
Mm.
like, the blurb on the back says, "Imagine the offspring of the Wind Up Bird Chronicle and the Virgin Suicides." And I was
Right?
like, "What?" Because I've read the Wind Up Bird Chronicle by
Me too.
Murakami a few years ago. It's nothing like the Wind Up Bird Chronicle. Like, the only thing it has in common is it's in Tokyo, and yes, there are some magical things that happen, but they're actually explained in this book. They're not, like, disparate
Oh,
magical realism things like they do
yeah.
are in the Wind Up Bird Chronicle. And the Virgin Suicides, I've never read the book or seen the movie, but I remember the trailer to the movie back in the day. So I looked up the synopsis on the book, and that just a synopsis of the Virgin Suicides is extremely, like, unsettling. It's extremely disturbing. That is not middle grade, but this is, to me, very middle grade. Like, it does deal with
Oh,
mental health, but
Mhm.
I think in an age appropriate way for the most part, and it's very much like a portal fantasy, and I loved it. I'm still thinking about it. I don't know that everyone will love it the way I did,
Yeah.
but there
oh
was
my
a
god,
certain
no.
plot reveal that happens at the end that I just thought was brilliant, and I don't
Yeah.
know. I hope you like it. If you guys like it, if you
I'm
read
I'm
it.
Every time
literally
I
gonna
see it,
read it next.
yeah, every time I
Yeah.
see it, I
Yeah,
think about how much I want to read it, and then I
same.
still have yet to pick it up, as with the majority of things.
Yeah, it's very slice of life for, like, the first half, so it kind of
Mhm.
might feel a little bit slow going, but
Mm,
I thought it was beautiful. I loved it. I think it's so much about friendship, and about friendship not just as a means to, like, to to cure or alleviate loneliness and isolation, but also to help you kind of reframe your life, to see things not necessarily in a dishonest way, in an honest way, but in an optimistic, resilient,
Mhm.
optimistic way. So I thought it was
Nice.
beautifully handled. I needed that. And that's the thing. I don't read very much middle grade. And after reading this, I'm thinking, it's funny, Gavin, because you were just saying you want to read more adult. I'm like thinking, I think I need to read more middle grade just because I read so much disturbing content lately. I've read so much disturbing content lately. But I'm like, I think I just
Yeah.
need that now and then. I need something a little
You
more warm and cozy now and then.
Some palate cleansers are great,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things why I loved, when I first joined BookTube. Actually, the first year I joined BookTube, I was all over the place, but then I started to kind of niche down a little bit with the middle grade, and there is so many there are so many great middle grades to read, and ones that really do have these big grand themes that I think are still relevant to a lot of us as adults too. And it sounds like Lonely Castle in the Mirror is one of those kinds of things that, oh my god, I'm so glad you read it and loved it, because I cannot wait to read it. So as soon
Hope
as I
you like
do,
it.
I'm gonna send you a message. I will send you a message as soon as I read it, because I'm just absolutely bursting to read it. But yeah, I love the fact that you want to read more middle grade. I'm trying to rack my brain for some good recommendations that maybe in the future you might want to, I don't know, try and give them a chance. Or but I don't know if anything will ever be as, I don't know. It sounds like Lonely Cast in the Mirror is quite thought provoking, so I'll
Mm.
have a serious think about it if you do want to read more middle grade.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I feel so hesitant about it because I've heard so many people criticize the book, but I also wonder if the expectation thing was what
Mhm.
went against it. Because I one of my friends said that people were complaining that the themes weren't subtle, and I'm like, "It's a middle grade book. Give it a break." Like, I think
Yeah,
it
I
did
had
so
no idea.
well. Yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, I think the cover kinda gave me middle grade vibes, but I don't know. I could see how it might
Yeah.
not too. I don't know.
For me, I picked it up and I liked the title, and I thought I saw that it was translated and I was like, okay, this is going to be like weird translated magical realism. And then I read the synopsis and I was like, okay, this gives weird translated magical realism. So I assume, and then with it being compared to Murakami as well, that's what I thought it was. I had no idea it was middle grade.
I need to go and read that full Guardian review, but I don't know where they're pulling Murakami into this. Like, it's nothing like the Wind-Up-Bird Chronicle. The Wind-Up-Bird Chronicle is not appropriate for middle grade. The
I
Virgin
mean,
Suicides, no, either. Yeah.
it might purely be because it's translated.
That's it, yeah,
That's the only thing.
and the translation for this, the Windenburg Chronicle, I wasn't super high on that book, like, I loved the writing. I thought the writing was it flowed so beautifully, and I don't know how much of that had to do with the translation,
Mhm.
but as
Mhm.
far as, like, the story as a whole, I just felt like it went over my head a little bit, but with this book, I would say the translation, it's very, very simple and clear. It's not lyrical, it's not something you pick up because of the prose or the
Oh,
themes, as people say. But I love the way I thought it was a beautiful, beautiful middle grade story.
if you're looking for more translated middle grade, I read The Beast Player by Nohoko
Mm.
Uehashi, which is very almost Ghibli-esque, but it
Oh,
is in typical translated fashion. It's a very like slow, thoughtful story about how much people should interfere with nature. And it's about it was a few years ago, but it's about a girl who finds this like magical creature, and she decides to stay with it instead of like letting it go wild, and it becomes like her companion.
interesting. Well, I always get excited anytime somebody says Studio Ghibli or something along those
Mm.
lines. I
Mhm.
always get excited. Last year,
Yep.
I watched Kiki's Delivery Service, and I think it
Yeah.
was one of my favorite things ever.
Yeah.
I loved it
I
so
love the
much.
bit in Kiki's Delivery Service where they're on the beach and the boy's friends pull up in the car and he says like, come and meet my friends, and she says something like, no, I'm going home now, and just turns around and walks off. And I was like, me too. Like, I'm not meeting your friends either, I am leaving.
So direct. It's like,
Like, she's
I don't
so
want
blunt,
to,
she's
I'm
like,
just
no, I
going.
want to go home now, and just leave.
Oh my gosh, I love that part. I love that whole entire movie. Loved it. And I
Oh,
was
you
like,
should.
"These."
Have you read the book?
I
Have you read the book
haven't.
yet?
Is it a
Oh my
book?
gosh.
I didn't know there was a book
Yeah.
it was based
Yeah,
on.
and it's a lovely little middle grade book, and honestly, some of the descriptions is so lovely. I remember like one of the opening lines of it is something, and it'll always stick with me because I just love the visual. But it was like these lines of houses had their roofs and it looked like toast, you know, like there was like this visual of like toast. And it just felt so, you know, like how like sometimes when there's food involved in books, you feel this warm, fuzzy feeling. I feel like, I mean, maybe not for everyone, sometimes it makes me hungry, but it just made you feel so cozy and so lovely. It's a really short book. So yeah, I would definitely recommend checking it out if you really enjoyed the movie, just to say like what differences it had and to read like maybe a little bit more middle grade as well. It was so good. I'm so glad you enjoyed the film.
On the theme of Ghibli and middle grade, I would also recommend reading Howl's Moving Castle, which is
Yeah.
one of my favorite middle grades. I love that book.
I do need to check that out. Actually, my friend Andrew said he's going to be reading that. Andrew's Wizardly Reads, his channel.
Mhm.
He said he was going to be reading that soon with Murphy, and I was like, "Tell me how it is," because I think I will try to pick that up at some point. How's
I
moving?
I love it. It's also like if you read it as a child and an adult, you'll take completely different things from it because as an adult, it has like a very romantic nature and reads almost like a whimsical romance. Whereas as a child, I feel like you'll hone in more on like the magic and the whimsy of it than like the romance that's also going on throughout the story.
Oh, yay! I will definitely
Jo-
check that out.
Joanna, you like Earthsea, don't you? Like you like the Earth,
I haven't
the
read it
series.
yet.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I have it. I own actually 2 copies or 2 editions of it, and my
Mm,
husband read the first 2 last year, loved it. He loved it
mhm.
and said that he thinks I would love it too. I read The Dispossessed by Le Guin earlier this year. That was my first Le Guin, but I haven't
Mm.
read anything else yet, but I'm really excited to because I think she's so incredibly talented.
I
Mhm.
was gonna say because I'm not sure if you probably haven't seen the film, the one that Studio Ghibli did, but yeah, I was just like really interested to see how people feel about the adaptation of Earthsea and like all of that stuff because I know a lot of people do love that series on BookTube. So I just wanted to maybe see if you'd already read them yet, but when you do, I would love to like if you read them first and then watch the adaptation that they did. I'd love to like know what you feel about that whole thing.
I'll let you know. Actually, that's something my husband and
Mm.
I talked about at one point because he's a huge Studio Ghibli fan, and so
Mm.
we were talking about watching all of the movies at some point.
Oh,
He's watched most
nice.
of them already,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's one that I think he'd probably love to get to since he's been reading the books, and we have HBO, so we have access to all
Mhm.
those. Fortunately,
Perfect.
that'll be
That
fun.
sounds like a really
Yeah,
fun time, actually.
it
Yeah.
does. I got excited, Gavin, because I saw in another maybe it was the same TBR or a different one that you're gonna be reading Fear Street. Is that
Oh,
accurate?
yes.
I still
Yeah,
have some of my old Fear Street copies, believe it or not, from when I was young.
well, as soon as you can, I would love to know which copies that you have because yeah, I want to try and read all of the original ones. I know there are so many different spin-offs and different kind of versions of it too. And it's the same with Goosebumps. Like for some reason, R.L. Stein he's probably writing every second of his life because he has so many books and so many different series. But I am really excited to read Fear Street because I love nostalgic books. A lot of the times I do criticize them because I don't think they've aged very well a lot of the times, but they are a relic of the past and they are so much fun to go back and see what life was like back then, how people approached literature in that day and age too. And R.L. Stein is just like I love and hate the man. Like he is so great, but also like so infuriating. Like you have so much. I feel like a lot of people say Stephen King doesn't know how to end his books and things like that.
Mm.
It's the exact same with R.L. Stein. He starts a book and he has like great concepts, but he never knows how to, stick the landing on them ever. And it's like, oh, he must have like 700, 800 books and I like, okay, come on, R.L. Stein, give me a great ending. So it's more of a fun game for me now to see which books of his actually have like really good endings. But I'm so excited to dive into Fear Street. I never read them when I was younger, and I missed out. I missed out. So if you have any Fear Street favorites, I'd love to know, or any
I don't
other like,
yeah.
nostalgic books that you can
Oh,
think of
yeah.
that you still
Okay.
love. I'd love to know as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think my favorite nostalgic read I discovered last year, one of them, It is another
Mm.
author who was around actually a bit earlier than R.L. Stine, Lois Duncan. Have you ever heard of her?
Yeah, yeah.
Right, it's
I read I Know What
before
You Did Last Summer. I've
yeah,
read that
yeah.
one.
Yeah, I read that one before the movie came out. I think that might be one of my least favorites of hers, but,
Mm.
um, Stranger with My Face by her.
Ooh.
And it could be just nostalgia. That's the hard part when it comes to
Yeah.
nostalgic
Mm.
reads, because I know there were certain things in there that as a reread, I could definitely tell were cringy, by modern eyes. Um, Same with R.L. Stine, because I just picked up some of my old Fear Street books and I opened one of them and it was so cringy. Like this makeout scene on the couch and the brother's gonna come in and it was bad. It was just so bad. But it was
You have
fun.
to
I
laugh
love
at
that
that.
though. I love
Yeah.
it though. Yeah, no, I love the campy, cringy stuff. So,
Gav, you
there's
should
some
do like the point horror books.
I've never
point
done those either. I've never read them in my
You
life.
never read? Oh, I used to because I was very, very poor growing up, so I was in and out of the library all of the time. So I used to pick up like just random books, and I'd take 12 books every week, read them, and get 12 more the week after. And I distinctly remember Babysitter's Club, Point
Mm.
Horror, Goosebumps, the horrible sad pet books. Do you remember those?
I don't
Whether
remember
it was
those.
No.
like about cats and dogs that would like go on. There was one called Tooth and Claw, and it was just
Oh,
about sad. Like what's the Disney film called with the? Is it two dogs and a cat, and they talk, and they're like lost, and they're trying to find their way home?
Oliver and Company?
No, no, it's like a
Bolt?
live action, and I'm
Mm.
sure it's two dogs and a cat, and they're trying to find their way home. And it's
Hmm.
just really sad, obviously, because they encounter all of these
Is it point
obstacles.
horror? Oh, sorry, it just had the
Yeah, the point horror ones are the ones that I first mentioned that are like they were individual kind of horror
oh,
stories, but they were all in a collection called Point. I don't think it's that Homeward Bound. Homeward
Homeward
Bound.
Bound.
Oh,
I used to
Homeward
own that
Bound.
book. I think I used to
Yeah.
own that book.
So they
Yeah,
had like all of these books that were in that style of like sad animal kind of books, and they're the ones that I
Oh,
distinctly remember from the library.
like
I
Where the
would
Red
stay
Fern
away from
Grows.
those.
I know
That's the
I
most
got one.
Mm.
I got one once and I read like the first page and I was like, I cannot handle it. And I took that
no.
straight back.
Have you guys read Where the Red Fern Grows? Probably the most
No.
depressing book in the world. Like one of the most depressing children's books ever. Yeah. I read it when I was a kid, and I
Now I want
remember
to.
Wow.
couldn't keep my eyes dry at the time. I would love to reread
Oh.
that someday though.
I wonder if I
Yeah.
can find out what the synopsis of that horrible cat book was that I got out from the library. It's like it's so traumatic that I remember what it was called, and it was when I was like 10 years old, and I only read maybe a chapter at most.
Wow,
Oh.
I don't think I have anything that I read at that age that stuck with me so viscerally. I remember watching the opening scene of Jaws, and that stuck with me for life. But in terms of books, I don't think I ever had that kind of experience as a child.
Yeah. Yeah, that I know The Red Fern Grows was pretty popular during its time, and it's such a sad book. It's so sad.
Okay, I found it. It says, abandoned in the depths of winter, the once pampered pets of men are left to their own fate. It's a battle to survive the cruel weather and the feral cats and dogs, but man becomes the worst enemy. To survive, the animals must unite in the most desperate fight of their lives.
Wow.
So it's about
Yikes.
abandoned pets that have to fight to survive.
Oh,
Yeah,
I wouldn't
Yeah,
and
believe
that's a
this when you
children's
read
book.
that.
that's
That's a
sad.
children's book.
Gosh.
That's the thing. There's so many children's books that I just don't think should actually be children's books. Like I know a lot of like old fairy tales as well are just like so dark and grisly, and you're like, why are these read to children? What? It's insane. Like Watership Down, yeah, I've never read it before, but the movie traumatized me as a child as well. But
Mhm.
I do want to read the book at some point. But yeah, like we we would never get away with that now. You would never read a middle grade book that was released in the last 10 years that has that kind of level of trauma. It's wild.
Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting how much that's changed over the years. I feel like
Mhm.
that kind of
Yeah.
content's different now.
Yeah.
Do you all have any strong
Literally.
feelings about that when it comes to the YA stuff? Because I know a lot of people have
Mm.
conversations about YA being written for adults rather than for younger audiences.
Mm.
Do you all think that that's
Yeah.
a thing?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I so I've just read the entire Princess Diaries series, and it was an experience, and that was what written in the 2000s, and I do feel like a lot of young adult authors from like maybe that period were like projecting a lot of like, adult humor and adult pop culture references that I don't think that age range would actually get. So Princess Diaries was littered with references that I just don't think teenagers in the 2000s would have known. And not just that, but like, yeah, relationships and romance in the YA books from that period too are just like so widely inappropriate. And I'm like,
Saying that
it's
though,
so, come
speaking
on,
as a
give it.
girl who was a teenager in the 2000s, it wasn't wild to want an 18-year-old boyfriend. I think the weird
I
thing
know.
about
Well,
it
yeah.
is that it's written by an adult woman projecting that onto
Mm,
kids. But like when it comes to relationships and things like this in books, like I
yeah.
remember being a teenager and as a 14, 15, and 16-year-old, you don't think it's
Mhm,
weird to want a boyfriend that's 17, 18, 19, 20. And I think it's definitely more of a product of the 2000s than it is
mhm.
quite so much now, but it does still happen today. And I think it's the weirdness is the fact that it's adults that are writing this kind of narrative that know better. Because when you're a teenager yourself, that's kind of almost normal.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that exactly. And I think with the Princess Diaries, absolutely. Like we all had crushes as teens, and like I know I definitely did. But like
Mm.
it's when they actually explore it in a way that it romanticizes it in a way like the relationship, like not just like you pining for someone older, but like when you're a vulnerable 14-year-old and then someone older is pressuring you to do things and you have an entire 10 book series like the Princess Diaries where it's like romanticized and things escalate and that's why like the lines get really blurred. And I mean I want to put the Princess Diaries behind me because it's not my thing, it's not my kind of series. But what I give so many of those kinds of books so much leniency as well because I think it is so important for a lot of things that were explored to be explored. But yeah, it's so
That
hard
was
now
also
because
very, very normal themes because when I was a teenager, I
Mhm,
exclusively read contemporary romance. And that was one of my favorite series from when I was a teenager was about a girl who was 16 or 17, just starting sixth form.
mhm.
And then she has a crush on a boy who's like 18, 19, and he cheats on his girlfriend with her. And like for the first book of this series, like they're together and he's cheating on his girlfriend. And that's just normal for like books of like that early 2000s period. Like every series that I read as a teenager that was a contemporary romance was pretty much like that.
Hmm.
So how do we, as modern day readers, because I get this a lot whenever I read something from that time and I give it even just the slightest bit of criticism. A lot of people say, oh, well, like you can't say that because of this, that, and the other. But I feel like as modern day readers, we can, like, as long as we're giving our opinion about it, we're informing people about it. And again, this is like a really weird kind of example, but when I did Goosebumps and I was picking out like all the like fat phobia that was in those books, and I was informing people about like, oh, obviously this was okay in the 90s, this was very normalized. These days it's not acceptable to say these things to people and think these things. But a lot of people, they probably take it very personally when you do like criticize books from that time period and you just like give some kind of commentary on it, because I feel like some people think that you're criticizing them for enjoying it when that's not the case at all. Because
Yes.
I still love Goosebumps. Like there are still things in that series that you just wouldn't get away with today, but I still love that series. But I think on YouTube, in the comments on YouTube, there's not a lot of nuance to things. People do just instantly take something and run with it, and they won't like kind of see any other side to it. But I feel like all three of us are in a position where we have a platform, we're reading books from years and years and years and years ago, and it's okay to criticize it for things that aren't okay today. But I just think a lot of people don't really get that distinction. Like we're not criticizing you for enjoying it, we're just criticizing the text, like what's presented in front of us. So I don't know if you guys get the same kind of thing when you're delving into the past, but I find it so interesting.
I
Yeah.
think it's important to identify, like, I've just read one of the Wheel of Time books where a character gets sexually assaulted, and then when they tell someone about it, they get laughed at. It's
Mm.
it's wild. It's wild, but it's a product of its time. It's like the mid 90s, and I think it's important because like there's a whole ton of like sexism and like irritating relationships in Wheel of Time. And it was normal for the time period, especially considering the age of Robert Jordan and like the background that he had. He had like I believe quite a religious background. Um and I think when I talk about like the Wheel of Time books, I say I understand that this is normal for the time period, but as somebody reading this in 2024, it's jarring because as a society, like we don't believe this anymore. But I think in terms of like presenting your opinions and stuff on like YouTube and things, one of the biggest things that I've learned is that there's no point being a people pleaser. Like you just kind of have to figure out what your stance is and stick to your stance and how you want to present information. Because if you start not pointing out the fat phobia, somebody's going to come in your comments and be like, what did you think of all this fat phobia? Why didn't you point out the fact that this is sexist? And if you do point it out, you'll have people saying that you're ridiculous and a snowflake because you care about something that's present in a book that was written in the 80s. So you can't really please everyone. So I feel like the best thing to do is like what feels true to you. Like if you want to highlight it, if that's important to you, then do it. If you don't, then don't. But like pacifying people in the comments is never going to work because you're always going to. For me, the thing is people who always want to catch me out. They're the ones that annoy me the most. Like the people who go out of their way to tell me that I'm wrong, which I'm never am. Just saying. I never am.
We know.
Yeah, the people who will come and tell you that you're wrong, or the people if you're 5 books into a series and they'll tell you that your opinion's wrong because in book 8 this character does this, and it's like, well, amazing, thank you for ruining my reading experience just to be right about something. I really appreciate that from you.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Joanna, do you ever like feel like you are okay with like giving your opinions on things from the past now? Like, do you feel like still comfortable to be able to be like, yeah, this was written at a different time period and stuff? Like, do you feel okay doing that also?
I think it could be tricky, like, especially with certain fandoms sometimes.
Mm. Oh yeah.
I I haven't run into this too badly. I know there was, like, one time where I misread something, and so I misread it to be problematic, and so I
Mm.
discussed it as, like, I think this was problematic, and I had a problem with it, and I didn't like it. And then
Mhm.
a lot of people chimed in, they're like, "It wasn't problematic because blah, 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 blah," and they
Mm.
explained it to me, and I'm like, "Oh, okay. Thank you for explaining it to me." And I felt kinda bad that I did interpret it incorrectly. That was on me, but at the same time, I still didn't like it. Like, it still didn't I was
Mm.
like, "Well, it still didn't work for me either way," even when it was
Yeah.
explained. Um, but yeah, it's really tricky. I don't like fat phobia. I can tell you that. Like, that's something that really upsets me when I see it in books. And at the same time, I lived during the time when that was considered funny, like in a lot of
Mm.
humor, like and not, people didn't think twice about it. So it is tricky, and I think it's both. I think you could say, well, I don't feel comfortable about it now as a modern day reader. That doesn't mean I am judging people who found that funny or whatever. It's just where I'm at right now. So I always just try to take ownership for what I feel as much as possible. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I am glad that we've evolved, but I think that's also hard too for authors because the thing I feel for when it comes to those kinds of authors, and of course, Robert Jordan isn't alive anymore. I haven't read The Wheel of Time, by the way, but the
Mhm.
hard part about that is that we are always evolving. So, like, there
Mhm.
could be things I say in videos that could be considered, that'll probably be considered problematic 10 years from now. Who knows? And we're constantly evolving, and I'd have to take ownership for that. And maybe I have the luck or luxury of being able to take that video down. But I think when you're a published author, it's kind of out of your hands at that point. So I
Mhm.
kind of feel for authors sometimes to some point because I'm like, well, the chances are they could have evolved from that point. Um,
Yeah.
and you
And a
never
lot of
know.
it's, like, I guess it's just intent, like, especially with authors. I mean, are they trying to provoke a community with something that they're talking about? Or is it like I know, I think Grady Hendrix, for example, he writes horrors from or like set during like the 80s or 90s and things like that when he's like displaying attitudes towards like so many different variations of people, loads of people from different walks of life. And I think there's a distinction between just like showing us what happened versus them like kind of joining in on any conversation that antagonizes any kind of minority groups or anything like that. So I do think it's like a case by case thing, and you do have to like take each book with, I guess, so like some kind of grace that you just like, okay, what's the author intending with this? So I totally agree, Joanna. It's a very tricky situation for a lot of authors.
I think as well it's hard because you have to think if you're writing a book in the 90s where society is just generally fat phobic, it isn't bad to be fat phobic. So for you to challenge the fat phobia is to be the person almost in the wrong because nobody else is doing that. So I feel like when it comes to criticizing authors who were writing these things in the 90s, it's almost like they didn't know better because nobody ever told them that they were wrong. And when everybody around you is telling you that to be fat is bad to be fat, then that's just something that you're going to believe because nobody's ever challenging that around you at all. And almost it would feel odd to readers who were reading it at the time for it to be portrayed any differently. So it is like it's a difficult, and like it's the same with all types, like with racism in classics is like another kind of illustration of this. So it is difficult because then the argument always comes up, well, like, yeah, it is still wrong to be fat phobic. And it's like, but can you blame people for just existing as a regular person in the time that they existed? Like, there is no right answer, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where it gets really, really tricky. It's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can say I'm reading a series right now, and The Wars of Light and Shadow by Jenny Wirtz, and there is a character in that series who is constantly described for his weight as being a point of humor, and I personally don't find it funny. I'll be honest, like it just isn't. It does not make me laugh at all every time I read it. I think that the author is intentional, and I don't know for sure. I don't want to speak for the author, but I'm getting the sense that that character is set up that way to be humorous, to subvert the trope that this is just a comic character so that he comes into play showing himself to be like heroic in some sense or showing himself to be important and kind of subverting that role in a way. So I kind of understand the intent of setting it up. And it was written during the 90s, I think, or early 2000s, around that time. So I kind of understand it, like both as part of its time and what it was trying to do in some ways. But I have to admit that the humor, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't, to me, age well either way, even though, like I said, it's written, I think, in a way to subvert those things.
So. I think
and it's a totally valid opinion.
It's valid.
An interesting thing to think about is what things do we think are normal now that are going to be problematic in the future? Yeah. Because there will be something.
There will.
But I'm not sure that I can tell you what it's going to be. But it will be something that we think is normal that will turn out to be problematic in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we just do our best. We review books and we love them. Like, sorry for bringing the conversation down a little bit.
No.
I was like,
sorry.
as an example.
It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of the blessings of doing BookTube and having a platform where we can talk about the things we love. But sometimes things come across our TBR that we just kind of feel the need to be able to have the freedom to say, this isn't right for me, or I don't agree with this. And we are absolutely valid in saying those things, I feel.
Yeah. I feel like it's also about the way that you express things, because I have watched reviews in the past where people say like, this book is terrible, this book is problematic. If you read this and you enjoy this, then you're problematic. Like, it's toxic and XYZ. I'm very intentional about when I dislike a book to say, I don't like this thing and this book has this thing, therefore I do not like this book. Not this book is bad, or if you like this book you have no taste, just I don't like these things and they are in this book. And I feel like that is sometimes where people feel like they're being attacked, when people are so brutal. It's talking in absolutes. Essentially, I don't like to talk in absolutes. I'm more like this is my opinion, because if anybody argues, then you can just say, well, it's my opinion. Like, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm the
Yeah.
same way, Becca. I'm, like, so uncomfortable with absolutes because of that
Mhm.
exact reason. And at the same time, I'll be honest, like, I've come around to, like, if another booktuber and honestly, I'm, like, always scared to do this for myself, but if another booktuber comes out and say, "These are the worst books," or, "These are bad
Mm,
books," or you know what I mean? If somebody
Mhm.
says that, like, I take it in good faith that this person
mm,
is talking about their own personal taste, and they're not
Mhm.
saying they're trying to make an objective statement. I take it in good faith about booktubers saying that, but I do understand a lot of people don't understand that. And then
I
they'll
also
suddenly yeah.
I don't care. Like if you rated my favorite book of last year 1 star, I don't care because your negative opinions don't change my positive opinions. I still loved the book regardless
mm,
of if you hated it. And I still loved it because I loved it, regardless of why you hated it. And you're not going to change my mind. So like your opinion on my favorite book is not relevant. It has nothing to do with me. So I don't know why people take it so personally, but they do. They do
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
It's it's a great thing and a bad thing as well because you see how passionate people are about their favorite books, and I honestly love it. Like as long as people are loving what they're reading and all that, it's amazing. I love seeing that passion about a niche because yeah, like booktube and like I guess books is like quite a niche thing in the grander scheme of things. But like with yeah, any kind of opinion online about like yeah, these are the worst books, but like yeah, it's always just yeah, these are just my opinion. And sometimes especially when I'm trying to do my own like worst books list or whatever, I always try and make it like a little bit funny just so that it kind of breaks the tension. Like I hate being negative, which is so comical considering I've read so many old series that I just did not enjoy, and so I have been critical, but like I hate being negative. I love being able to be positive, but also have the space where I'm not lying about anything. I can be honest about what I feel about something. So if it is negative, then it's absolutely fine to say. But yeah, I feel like what Becca said before too about the way people sometimes come across as when they're talking about their worst books or talking negatively about a book, because sometimes rant reviews are the most popular thing on BookTube sometimes, or
Mhm.
someone's negative opinion on something will be a lot more popular than their positive opinion on something. So it's definitely something that I've been very conscious of since joining BookTube, that I never ever tell anyone this is the worst book and you're the worst person for liking it. Like that is just never going to be me. And I hope nobody ever does that, even though I have seen like
Um,
some people do that online, but it's just not really what we do. I much prefer to be positive, but not shy away from when things do need to be discussed.
they do, yeah, yeah. I feel like I can honestly do a better job on that because, like, I know it's hard because I feel like I read a lot of really dark books at times, or I have this last couple of years, and some of those books do have some heavy content, some triggering content, and sometimes, like, there'll be a scene that'll be kind of like, "Why did the author put that scene in there?" But it
Mm,
won't be, like, the reason that it won't necessarily be what I think about when I think about the book. I'm trying to think of an example. Okay, I'll give you an example. So, like Ursula K. Le Guin's The Dispossessed. There's a scene in that book that's really disturbing, and um, I don't really have an answer for it. I'm sure on Reddit, if I looked it up, there'd be some kind of answer for why she wrote that scene. But I didn't think about that scene when I finished the book. I loved the book. But when I say I love the book, it's not like I love the book and because of that it didn't negate my love of the book, but it also didn't add to my love of the book, if that makes sense. It's not
Mhm.
like I
yeah.
love that book because of that scene, if that makes sense. So sometimes I feel
Mm,
like I could do a better job of saying, and there's a scene in here that you need to be
yeah.
aware of. Because I know a friend of mine, Alan, read the book and he said, "You didn't even have a reason for that scene." I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. I don't know why that was in there." So I think I could do a better job of like saying there are these specific scenes that might be unsettling. So just be
Mm.
warned. Yeah.
We're all learning. I feel like BookTube is still unfigured. I feel like there's still so much for us to learn, so much for us to do. I don't think anyone has really perfected the BookTube formula. And we're all just like regular people just talking about what we love online. There's nothing really too professional about it, really. Like it's all good fun. So yeah, I feel like we're always going to be constantly learning. in giving our opinions on things. And yeah, we're just gonna have to have fun in
And
the meantime.
and I'm a big believer, as much as we are constantly learning and evolving, and there are things, like we were saying, that we'll be learning years from now that
Mhm.
we'll have to evolve about or evolve our thinking about, which I think is a good thing. It's a healthy thing. I think when it comes
Mhm.
to things like this, like maybe standards we're not quite as keen on anymore, or in this case, like what Michelle's saying, heroines are smallest, most beautiful women, and how men have to be hulking, tall, and handsome. I think like my the way that I think a good solution maybe, and I'm not saying it's the only solution, is to promote what you're for. So if you see a book that defies that standard, then promote that and say, "Hey, this
Mhm.
is a book that doesn't follow that standard, and this is what I love to see." And I think that could be a great way of promoting that change in a way.
Absolutely. I
I
think what
agree.
you were saying about like content warnings and like flagging them and things is difficult, especially from my perspective. I am unbothered by most things. So sometimes I will forget. Like if something happens in the first 50 pages of a book and I only update a vlog 250 pages in, I've forgotten the content warning for the first 50 pages because I generally am not triggered. And I know
Same.
we don't
Yeah.
have as much discussion around it now as we used to, but I remember back in like 2020, it was like a massive thing of everybody being like, oh, not everybody, sorry, like, but people constantly being like, this has a content warning and you didn't flag it. I didn't know that this book had like this content. And that can also be something that's really difficult to navigate because, again, from my opinion, you're never going to flag all of the content in a book because what people can be triggered by is so individual to them. And some things can be triggering, but only in certain contexts. And it's so hard to, once again, navigate that field where you're letting people know if there is some really traumatic content in there. But at the same time, like you're never going to be able to catch it all.
Oh my gosh, you explained that so much better than what I was trying to say.
Becca's
I
the
think that's
best at
exactly
explaining
it.
things.
Yes, she is. Becca, you're the
Thank
best at
you.
explaining things, because that's exactly it. I think that's my experience is I'll
Hmm.
read the book and I'll notice it, but it won't, some things just don't trigger me the way they might other readers.
Hmm.
And so it's not what I think, but it's not also not what I think about when I think about loving a book, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Mhm.
So it's
Yes.
not like fresh in my head, like, oh, I love the book. And then people, yeah, it is kind of like a fear that they'll might equate my love with something that I'm not even thinking about when I'm saying that.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's exactly it.
Are both of you like? Because I'm also not really that bothered by a lot of things. Like, I'm a little bit concerned for myself that I'm not that much bothered by like things that I read in books. I'm like, why am I insensitive to that? Well, not exactly insensitive, but like I don't feel horrified the way that I probably should because I tried a few extreme horror books and like they were, I mean, yeah, they were awful and they were traumatic, but like I just for some reason it's just like I didn't feel so much about what I was reading, and I feel like a little bit weird that I don't think I'm triggered by a lot of things that are in books, and like I should be. I feel like
I
I should
mean,
be, but why
I
can't I?
I don't know obviously what your guys' experience are, but I was subject to some traumatic things as a child. I was also watching horror movies when I was like 4. So I've
Mhm,
become desensitized to a lot of truly horrific things. But then on the flip
mhm,
side of that, I have health anxiety. And if I'm reading a sci-fi where somebody gets like a blood transfusion with like I've read one before where they get like essentially little antibodies that like will fix the blood and like they keep you young so you get all the blood replaced in your body, and that almost made me DNF the book because I couldn't handle the thought of having all of your blood transfused. But like
mhm.
anything that's like would be considered extreme horror, I am fine with.
Isn't that crazy? Like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh. So I what you're saying, it's funny because I think we're all so individual is what that makes me think of, Becca. And, we all come from our own individual experiences. The
Hmm.
funny thing to me is that I've read a lot of really heavy, dark books, like a lot of sexually explicit violence, things like that. And the weirdest thing is that the book that triggered me the most over the last 5, 6 years of all books, I think, was To All the Boys I Have Loved Before.
Wow.
Because yeah, get this. So I did read that book, but I was listening to the audiobook and there was a scene where she had this very minor car collision, and I was listening to the audiobook and I had gone through a car collision, like a car accident, black ice, a few years before, but I listened to that scene and my whole body started to go through a minor panic attack. And I was
Mm.
like, I am getting a panic attack over to all the boys I love before. Like of all the books, you know?
Yeah,
So
of all the places, you just never know where you're gonna find it. Like,
you never know. Yes, you never
never know.
know. So I mean, there are just those off the wall weird things I think that can can affect you and when nothing else will. That's kind of a
Mhm.
strange thing.
True. I guess I need to just again like just go outside of my comfort zone a little bit, and I do need to read more of those adult books, and that's what I've been trying to do. So who knows? Maybe something will happen because I just I feel like maybe I'm a little bit desensitized
I
by
mean,
a whole lot of stuff. So
even I DNF'd Black Leopard Red Wolf recently because that is just so endlessly dark with I don't want to say it has no point. I only read like 200 pages, so I can't speak for like the end of it. And I believe that Marlon James's driving force in that book is to stop you from being complacent to violence because you should never be complacent to violence. So all of the horrible things are supposed to make you feel uncomfortable. But for me, that book made me feel so uncomfortable with so little positives that I just DNF'd it because it wasn't that it was like triggering me, but it was that it was so endlessly brutal and for very little reward to where I was up to in the book. And I was like, I just don't want to read this anymore because nothing about it is enjoyable right now.
I don't think I'd
that's
want to
not why
read it.
you read.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
not
not
why you
why we
read.
read. We don't we don't do that. I love reading when I can feel good about myself or like feel good about what I'm reading. So if there's something that is endlessly dark, I do love engaging with texts that are dark, and I do love like horror and thriller and stuff like that. You know, of course, like sometimes not everything is like hunky dory and everything's rosy, but if something is just endlessly, it's like why am I reading it? Like what am I
Because it
getting
was
out of
like
that
it was
experience?
explicitly graphic and the
Mm.
content was past the point of like regular content that
But
you
was
would
there a
see.
point? Was there a point in that? Like, was the author trying to say something with that? Or
The,
I guess
the
like not every
point
author has to say something, but why?
from what I gathered from the reviews that I read is that the point is that fantasy he's also a literary fiction author that's writing like literary fantasy as well.
Mm.
So I feel like everything has a point in there. But it was essentially just because so many books we read are violent, so many movies we watch are violent, to the point where we're desensitized, as we've like just been discussing. And the point is for you not to be desensitized when you're reading it, but like you have to. And I knew going into it that you would have to push through the first like 250 pages, and I just could not. I couldn't get past it.
Yeah. Yeah. I
It
don't
was
think I
just
would.
bleak, like
Yeah.
endlessly bleak.
Yeah. I mean, I've read some really bleak books, but if there's no purpose behind it, like I I'm not sold on a book just because it's bleak, if that makes sense. Like there has
Mhm,
to be something there.
mhm.
Yeah.
Not bleakness for bleakness sake, in other words.
I think something that was bothering me about it as well is that the main character was like wasn't batting an eye to some of the things that were going on. And I knew from reviews that I'd seen that eventually like you're supposed to root for this character. And it was the complacency to the violence on behalf of the characters that I didn't like very
Oh,
much.
I do not like that either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's sounds like you're very clear though about what didn't work for you. I did notice that in one of your recent wrap ups. You were talking about DNFs. I think you talked about that book as well, and how I think yeah. I think is it always like really crystal clear to you when you DNF a book, like the reason why you're DNFing it?
It's actually really hard for me because I'm a completionist at heart. So like I want to
Uh,
finish everything. I
Yeah.
also can't be uncomfortable for very long though. So once I acknowledge to myself that I'm not enjoying a book. So if I was reading a book and I was 80 pages in and I thought if I'm not liking this by page 100, I'm going to DNF it. I'll have DNF'd it before page 85 because I then cannot commit to the next 20 pages. But getting me to that point where I want to DNF, it's took me a long time to be able to DNF books. And now it's at the point where I have so many books that I'm like, if I'm reading a book and it's just going to be a 3-star that I forget about, why am I reading it?
yeah.
That's interesting you mentioned that as well, because it took me a long time to DNF things. I didn't even realize you could do that before I jumped in. Like, wait, you can stop reading a book at any time? Like,
Yeah, like
really?
it's on YouTube. I didn't. I
Yeah.
could never not finish. Like People start books and don't finish them. What is that?
Yeah,
So I
that is
have a
just so
video,
enchanted.
I have a video here on YouTube on the booktube advice I don't take, and it's about why I resist DNFing books. Though it's not
Mm,
totally true that I don't DNF. I do DNF audiobooks. Oddly, if I can't get into an audiobook, I
Mm,
sometimes it's the case where I'm like, I think it's a narrator thing or it's the format thing with audiobooks because I don't
mm,
necessarily process things the same way with audiobooks that I do with when reading visually.
mhm,
mhm,
So I do DNF audiobooks sometimes, but when it comes to visually reading a book, what happened was, and the reason why is because I went through a period of my life where I could not finish a book. Like I went through several years where I was DNFing everything. Like I just couldn't finish a book. And it was completely sucking out my motivation to read because I would DNF a book and I just be like, I can't finish that book. I need to finish that book, but I can't. And then I don't know. It just was a spiral for me. It was a bad spiral. And then all these years later, though, I started getting into reading again. And once I started like finishing books, I think I felt like I needed to be a completing books did enhance my motivation. And so
mhm.
I do think I'm a completionist now. But I did give myself initially that same rule where it's like, I think a similar rule where it's like, if it was a YA book, I had to get into it at the 50-page mark or beyond. At least give it 50 pages. If it's an adult book, give it 100 pages. That was always my threshold. But usually, if I give it that long, usually I'm invested at that point most of the time.
I really struggle because I'm a never say never kind of person, and I won't speak of something that isn't my own experience or is directly related to my own personal opinion or experience. So I would never say, generally, I wouldn't talk badly about a book unless I'd finished the book. Because if I
Mhm.
haven't finished the book, then how can I speak on it? Because I didn't see it through.
mm,
And it's really hard to identify a book that you're not enjoying that isn't, how do you know it's not going to be worth it if you don't finish that book? But so many times I pushed through the book and it never got better. It was just the
Uh,
same all the way through. But on the
Experience.
flip side of that, my favorite series is Red Rising. And if I'd have employed that same thinking, I would have DNF'd Red Rising before I ever got into it, because that book, in my opinion, only gets interesting halfway through.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that's my
yeah,
favorite
I
series
agree.
of all time. Like, I'm ride or die for Red Rising, but the first half of that is just, it has two false starts essentially. Info dumps so much information at you, introduces you to three different societies and three sets of people before it actually settles on a plot. And it's like I was halfway through that book and I didn't have a clue what was going on and I didn't care about anything. And it's now my favorite series ever.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I
That's
will say
a
this
great
about
lesson.
yeah, with Red
Yeah.
Rising, I have to say I'm not a big fan of the trilogy, and some of that could have been
Mm-hmm.
a timing thing, but I do think that Pierce Brown, the author, improves dramatically as a writer from book to book. I
Mm-hmm.
can say like I don't know very many authors I've seen have such a progression as he does.
It's the
Yeah.
level of drama for me in those books. It's the backstabbing and the
Mhm.
betrayals and the plot twists and also the bromances, like the relationships,
Ah,
because everything feels so like deep to them, like everything's life or death when they're betraying each other. And I think that the
Mhm.
way that he does it is, and the fact that you know that he's going to follow through as well, like he's not scared to kill anybody.
well, as an
And
honorary Jude bro, I can get behind that.
he, I feel like so many books you read, like you know that the stakes aren't really high, but with Pierce Brown, like you're never, like the stakes are always high, and you're never sure who's going to survive. And I appreciate that because I read so many books where I'm like, I would be emotionally invested in this if I thought anyone was going to die, but they're not.
Yeah,
The
it's cool.
I love the what you were saying about you could have DNF'd Red Rising at one point and it's turned out to be one of your favorite series. This is the
Mhm,
thing that prevents me from DNFing sometimes because yeah, sometimes you just never know. If it's a standalone, I'm more likely to DNF, but if it's the first in a series, I'm a lot more lenient and I just don't want to miss out on something that could be like really special. So
mhm,
yeah, and also Joanna, what you said as well about how authors like improve, like P.S. Brown improves his writing and stuff. I love, absolutely love watching an author's writing just grow and blossom and just get better over time. It's one of my favorite things about reading is in being a fan of a certain author. And yeah, like Becca would write or die for P.S. Brown. It's like, yeah, you kind of you want to see them just develop and become the best. And there's also other times when you see them not get as great as it goes on, but at that point you kind of just like, you know what, they're one of my favorite authors, so I'm gonna let it slide. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes that happens too, but it's honestly one of the joys of reading is seeing, because I at one point I wanted to be a writer. I loved writing so much, and I really wanted to be a writer. But over years, I think my love for making videos and reading overtook that passion for writing. So now I'm like totally on the opposite side, and I hope people can see me improve like as a booktuber over time, making videos over time. Just like I see authors improve from like their first book to their most recent book, and I just love that experience so much because everything is so creative. I love the creativity behind writing and making videos. Yeah, it's just I just have so much admiration for people who do that.
Aw, that's so awesome. Yeah, in my video about, like, why I don't DNF books, I listed a bunch
Mm,
of books that after I decided I was not gonna be a DNFer unless I passed the 50-page mark for YA or a 100-page mark for adult, I listed off the
mm,
books I DNF'd, and I regretted DNFing every single one. So, like, for example,
mm,
American Gods is one I DNF'd, Fireborn, which is a BookTube darling. I'd read that, started that before it was a BookTube darling, got
Mm.
50 pages in, I was like, I'm not feeling it." To take it back to the library. There were some other ones, Cashiel's Dart. I didn't like
Oh,
the
I've heard that's very good.
sexually. Oh, is it?
I
Yeah.
haven't read it, but I've heard that it's very, very good. If you want
Yeah.
political and also romantic, I think,
I
fantasy.
did, and I was talking about how I don't get triggered very easily. I did get unsettled with some of the more sexually masochistic things in that book.
Mm.
It just didn't. Oh, I
mm.
did not feel comfortable. But everyone told me it got better. That I just read up. That if I had kept going, that it actually would have that stuff would have settled down. But yeah, I don't know. There were several books in that list that I DNF'd, and I could go back. I could definitely go back to all of them, but once I DNF, I've noticed, like, the momentum to go back to something is just gone.
Yeah,
Like, I haven't
if
lost
I
it.
DNF something, nothing will convince me to go back. It doesn't exist in my brain anymore once I've decided to DNF. I
But
can't
do you not
also
have like two different ones, like DNF forever and then DNF for now? Because sometimes it's
no,
you, sometimes it's not the
no.
book, sometimes it's you. Like Becca, I know you're perfect and you're amazing and all of the above. But like, do you not ever feel like, oh, maybe it's just my mood? Like right now, I don't fancy this, so I'm just gonna put it aside for now. It's me,
Mm,
not the book.
no,
What?
because that's a me problem. It's definitely a me problem. I If I've DNF'd a book, that forever has negative thoughts attached to it, so I will never go back to it because every time I think about it, I'll think bad things about it. So, and then to get
Okay.
the motivation to pick that book up over all of the other books I've got, it's never going to happen.
Mm.
I
Okay.
also really struggle
Same way.
with starting a book and then deciding, like you said, I'm not in the mood for it. I know if I stop reading that book, I'm not coming back. So I have to make the decision to DNF or power through.
Interesting. I love how different we are as readers. Like
I
it's
know,
like
because
Yeah.
all
we
of us.
can be the same person, but also very different. It's weird. It's very weird.
Yeah,
I wanna
I
ask you
totally.
guys about vlogging, though, because both of you have done a lot of long form vlogs, and do you find that is it often the case? Because I imagine this might be the case, where you have this idea for a vlog and you start the vlog, and the way the vlog ends goes in a direction that you might not expect. Does that ever
Mhm,
happen to you too? Or do you
absolutely.
find like it
I,
usually kind of goes as you expect?
I also find that I lose motivation as I get to the end. And the only way to like I'll start, if you watch my like a regular vlog from me, I'll start updating maybe twice a day. There'll be lots of B-roll. And then you'll get to like Friday, and then it'll just go Saturday, Sunday with no like B-roll in between because I've forgotten, like I've lost the track of the vlog along the way. So I do try. It doesn't happen very often, but I try to edit them as I'm filming them. So I always know like where I'm up to, and it kind of keeps the motivation there. But yeah, otherwise they just kind of derail as they go.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. I'm glad to hear you say that because now that you're saying that, I've never thought about it before, but I feel like I've seen a lot of vlogs before. Not your vlogs necessarily, but just like
Hmm.
vlogs on some people's channels, like fast forward, I'm now a few days later. I'm like,
No,
oh, okay. And it never bothers me as a viewer, but I'm like
no.
thinking, I wonder if that happens to a lot of people now that you say that.
It gets annoying as you're filming because you'll be aware that you should be vlogging more, but you just can't. You just lost the motivation. somewhere along the way. And then I'll end a vlog and then I'll just start a new vlog with the best intentions again. And as you get to the end of the week, like it starts to taper off. It does help if I have things that I'm doing at the weekend because that obviously keeps the vlog alive towards the end. But yeah, no, it's definitely a struggle.
Yeah, and I can definitely agree with that as well. And because me and Becca we do booktube like full time, this is like predominantly our main job. So it's interesting because I try not to be too intentional. Like if I'm doing just a general vlog, I try and just go with the flow for the week and I try not to. But it's so hard to do that when you're me because I love having themes. I love doing specific things and I love having things be in such a concise manner sometimes, but make it fun. So it is hard because I do feel what Becca's saying. If the week goes on, I will maybe start lose a bit more motivation. I'm like, okay, how can I pick myself back up? And it really depends on what I'm reading sometimes on the vlog. And I think that's also why I kind of like incorporating a lot of lifestyle stuff into it too, and trying to make things like a little bit more upbeat. I just started filming a vlog today, and it's just like random. It's really random. It's just me going through a week, just doing random things, just reading random stuff. And honestly, sometimes just going with the flow is the best way because if you try, like, as I say, me and Becca do this like as a job now. If I try to structure it too much, that's when I start to lose motivation. That's when
Mhm.
I kind of don't want to do it because I also hate telling myself what to do. I'm a terrible boss. I'm my own boss. I hate it. I hate being my own boss because I don't have any discipline. I try to resist when I go, okay, Gavin, you need to do this. You need to film that today. You need to read this today. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I'm too much of a free
Which is
spirit. I
why
don't
I
do it.
don't make the content that you do, because if I
Mm,
said that I was going to, I wouldn't.
yeah,
Oh,
I
Like your
know. I
content
know.
is too planned
hard.
and structured and too planned in advance for me, and that's I love plans, but I'm also the point if I don't want to do something, I'm not doing it. And it's really hard sometimes, like working for yourself. Like if I take unboxings, for example. The fun for me is opening the box. It's not editing the unboxing. It's not watching the unboxing back. So I will drag my feet for hours editing an unboxing because I don't want to do it, even though I could just blast through it in an hour and it would be done. Like it's really hard, like with Gavin, to force myself to do something I don't want to do, which is why I don't know how Gavin makes the content that he makes because, like I said, I can't be uncomfortable for long. So I could not force myself to read like 60 Goosebumps books when I'm bored by like book 20. Like I would not be happening.
You know what? It's interesting you say that as well because yeah, sometimes I get way too excited about what I'm gonna do in the future. So I'll have an idea for a vlog and I'm so excited to make it, and then I start making it, and then I'm like, you know what, actually, I kind of really don't fancy doing this anymore right now. So it's like really interesting you say that, but I am trying so hard in 2024 to kind of go more with like that flow and just vlogging what I want to vlog, which is why I do like some like slice of life vlogs instead of trying to theme and structure everything. And also, yeah, vlogging does interrupt my reading too. I would read so much more if I didn't vlog.
I
I
do
would read
have
so much more.
I do have like an easy hack for people who want to vlog and they struggle with that. So if you this is how I started vlogging before like I kind of got into the habit of it and kind of know what I'm doing or do it more intuitively now. So if you're doing like a reading vlog and you don't know how to start doing them, update at the start of the book saying what the book is about, update halfway through giving an updated synopsis on what the book is actually about and your thoughts on it so far, and then update at the end with your thoughts, and just do that for every book. Edit it together. You have a vlog. Eventually, if you want to, you can like fill in the gaps. But that's for me. That's the basics of what you need. You need the introduction of why you're reading it and what it is. An actual synopsis when you know what it's about and your thoughts on it so far, and then just the rating and review at the end.
I
And
love
that's
that. Thank you for that. Because I actually do want to do a vlog at some point. I haven't done I have a couple of videos on my channel that I call vlogs, but they're not real vlogs and
mhm.
they didn't really perform very well, which no surprise, but they were more like this is my vacation and I read this, but
Yeah,
they weren't like updates, you know what I mean? Like a
yeah. So
normal
it's more
vlog.
like B-roll and like
Yeah,
highlights. Yeah.
yeah. There was one I did in my niece's, bedroom, which is kind of fun because it's, like, all fairy tale-like. But I
Cute.
yeah, I really wanna do a vlog, like, specifically a reading
Please.
vlog. I guess I'll just go ahead and give this away here. when I get to, and I'm going to get a lot of pressure, and that's fine. But when I read Ship of Magic, I would really like to do a reading vlog when I read that, which will take me forever to do because that book is long and it'll
I
probably take me
love
forever to
Ship of
read.
Magic is my favorite book in the entire realm of the Oddlings.
Oh, yay! I
I
know.
love
I've had
it.
so many people tell me that they think I'll love live ship traders. Like, I know people are excited, and I love Robin Hobb. I loved Farseer, so I
Mm.
know I have high hopes I'm gonna love that book, and I know a lot of people are gonna wanna hear thoughts, and so I thought, "Why not give them a vlog?" I already have ideas of, like, B-roll footage of making my matcha latte in the morning or whatever, but I'm not saying it's gonna be on, the level of these 2 fantastic guests here, but I would really like to try it out because I think there's something to vlogs I've noticed, and I noticed this, with a friend of mine who just recently did one. I think there's something that breaks a third wall, if that makes sense. I mean, I kind of
Mhm.
get that sense a little bit with these live discussions. Like it's not
Mhm.
edited, it's not me presenting myself in a certain way. There's something about a vlog that kind of just breaks through a certain wall where
The
it
thing
feels
with
more
vlogs about
real.
me, and I've said this before. I think that you can see a person's personality in the way that they edit a vlog. Because like sit down videos, you literally just cut all the gaps out of them, maybe put a few like little cuts in and stuff. But it's not, even if you don't script your videos, it's almost scripted to a degree. It's just somebody sat there talking to a camera. I feel like the way that you edit your vlog can show your personality a lot. And also, you can have a lot more fun and creativity in vlog editing than you get to have in like regular videos. So I love, because like think of all of the vlogs that you've watched and how differently the tone is, the atmosphere is, like the structure of it is. Like I feel like there's so much creativity in vlogs, and it used to make me so mad back in probably like 2019, 2020, when people used to say that vlogs were lazy content. And it's like vlogs take me the longest to put together.
Oh, I
Like
believe it.
it takes me a day to edit a vlog. It's
Oh
so
my
long.
gosh. I believe you.
I Yeah, I mean, yeah, I love what you said about like seeing the personality of someone as well in like vlogs.
Mm,
It's why I subscribe to people a lot of the times is I subscribe to them and them as like people because sometimes I don't have the same reading tastes as a lot of the people I subscribe to, but I would happily sit
same.
through an hour vlog, 2 hour vlog on someone talking about books I'm probably never going to read, but just because it does feel like hanging out, like you said, Joanne, it really does feel like they're breaking the fourth wall. They're talking to
Mm.
you and it feels like a really comfortable cozy sit down conversation almost, and that's exactly why I love doing vlogs too. I'm not being professional or anything, I'm just going through my life, I'm just talking about things, and I would honestly love to see everyone vlog. I really would. I think, didn't Jimmy say that he was going to start doing some as well
Yes!
on one of I was like, please, like, I want to see more, like if the especially like the fantasy booktubers who I watch, like I would love to see a lot more like vlogs. Like I know Murphy does it, which are great. I want to see more people do that because they're my favorite content. It really is, and you
I
can
mainly watch
talk about
vlogs.
things. Yeah, vlogs are the absolute best. I want to see people be themselves and talk about things. I'm more likely to watch a vlog over a sit down video.
Wow.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's something really special about that. Like it really does. It feels like you're just being cozy with somebody. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. I love that too. And
Yeah.
wow, I mean, I guess they are a lot of work. It does sound like it. A lot of editing work.
I noticed that
Yeah.
Dom asked a while back, like, if we've ever thought of outsourcing the video editing process. And I
Oh
think,
yeah.
building on from what I just said, I don't think that I don't think anybody else could edit my videos because you would be able to tell that it wasn't me that edited them. And I think that that it just wouldn't be right. Like, I would know watching them that it wasn't me that did it, and it would just feel weird. I
Yeah.
feel
Mm,
like you would
I'm
be
the
able
same.
to tell.
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm the exact same. I love, in fact, one of my favorite things about doing it is editing. Sometimes it can really make magic happen because I'll film a video and yeah, Philip, I absolutely do want to say that. And
Yes.
I could be filming a video and it's like probably in my mind, it's like the worst video I've ever filmed. I'm like, this is going to be terrible. It's going to perform poorly. And like, I didn't think I talked about things very well and I stuttered a lot and I went around in circles. And then as soon as I sit down to edit, and I'm editing all together and I
Mhm.
see I see it come together. Like, say, for example, and I'm going to talk about it for the rest of time, but like my Lord of the Rings vlog, I had the most fun editing it because I was like, I'm going to make magic with this. I'm going to, I'm going to license the songs from the films. I'm going to include them, and I'm going to put all this B-roll footage together and make it seem like really magical in that you're in the Shire too. I just love it so much. So I don't think I could ever let anyone edit my vlogs because that's where I
You
have
would
the most fun.
also have to convey all of that you just said to somebody else, at which point you might as well just edit it yourself.
Yeah, because a lot of people, actually, somebody did offer to edit my manga videos, which was so lovely of them.
Mhm.
And they were telling me like what would be required, and like they would need like a list of cuts and sort of like what if you talk so many times and you say the same thing, like which sentence would do you want to use, and like like there were different things that I just think it will probably just be easier if I just do it, like
Yeah.
stuff like that. So it's
It's
a
like
lot of work.
I know the pattern of my own speech and I know what needs cutting. And
Yeah,
just
Yeah.
having to convey that to somebody else is just a
yeah.
lot. Like, it's just so
And
much
I
easier, I feel, to do it myself.
I just did like, so like my Spy Family vlog, it was 3 hours and 3 minutes in raw footage, and I cut it down to 1 hour 55 because about an hour and 5 minutes of the raw footage is me just talking in circles. Maybe sometimes I repeat a sentence, and I don't have it scripted. I don't have notes a lot of the time, but I'll start a sentence again if I stumble, because yeah, I would hate for someone to see my raw footage of me filming because I make so many mistakes. Even like 5 years into booktube, I still stumble over my words. I still stutter a lot. I still feel like anxious of what I'm saying sometimes on camera.
Mhm.
And if somebody saw all of that, I don't know what I would do. I'd be so embarrassed. But like it's where the magic happens, is the cutting room. It's like sometimes
Sometimes,
I'll have my coffee and I'll sit down. I'm like, oh, I've got an editing day today. Yay! I don't have to be on camera, and it's great.
yeah, I do. Oh, I get tired about halfway through the day though, and I just want the video to be over so that I can stop.
Yeah, try. Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes when I film and I go off on a tangent, and then immediately after I finish the tangent, I know that I'm just going to cut it because that was just me
Mm.
going off on a tangent that nobody needs to hear. But obviously, if
Yes.
you're giving that footage to somebody else, they don't know that that tangent needs removing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know
sometimes if I'm
how
not
that would work. I mean, no judgment to anyone who has, a professional editor. I think that's amazing if you're able to work with somebody who can understand you in that regard, but my god, I think that would take a lot of mind reading, that would take a lot of notes. It feels like
Mhm.
that would almost take more work on the back end in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if it was maybe a scripted video that was quite short, and they can do like all the fancy explosions and zooms and all of that kind of stuff, then fair enough, have a way at it.
Yeah.
But I would not send 9 hours of raw footage to someone to, cut that down. It would take too long.
I
Yeah,
think most
that's
people, they would
true.
simply refuse because the sheer amount of footage that you have is intense.
I
I
guess I can
think, yeah.
understand it from that regard. From that regard, like if it's like effects, my friend
Mhm.
Whitney from Secret Sauce the Storycraft, amazing sci-fi channel. She has some of the coolest effects in her videos. Like, how did you do that? You just made dust come out and this do that. And I know it takes her a while to do all that, all those details. That might be different, but actually like refining what you're saying in a vlog, I think that's a
Mm.
whole other skill set.
What was her channel name again? Sorry, so I
Oh,
can.
yeah, sure. Yeah. Secret Sauce of Storycraft. Highly recommend everybody check it out. She did a phenomenal the video I will recommend the most from her. She did a phenomenal Octavia Butler video. It's like an hour-long video. Maybe it's an hour,
Mm.
maybe it's shorter than that, but it's a really long form video on all the works of Octavia Butler and what makes Octavia Butler such a remarkable author. Love that video.
Oh my god, Joanna, don't hate me, but I've never read Octavia Butler. I have Beloved, and I'm going to no, no, that's not Beloved.
That's Toni Morrison.
What's it called?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
Uh,
what's the
have.
one that Kindred,
Kindred?
Kindred,
Yeah.
Kindred. Yeah, Kindred. That's the one I want to read. That's the one I want to read. So don't hate me. I haven't read, but I've just searched for Secret Source of Storycraft, and that's a great name as well. That's a
Yeah.
fantastic name.
I
Oh,
think
she
I have
has such good
Wild Seed is the only Octavia Butler that I have, and I have not read it yet either.
Yeah, I've only read Kindred, to be fair. Only read Kindred. I know
Yeah.
Parable of the Sower is a lot of is
Mhm.
very, well, it's like a booktube darling at this point. I love
Mm.
Kindred. Another channel, and I cannot remember the channel's name, did an amazing video on that book too recently. If anybody can remind me in the comments here in the chat. But yeah, anyhow, Octavia Butler, her book Kindred, though, it's rather dark and bleak. It's a time travel narrative, but it's got to be one of my all-time favorite books.
I
It's one of
think
those
that's
books.
why I haven't read Octavia Rebuttal yet, because I know it's like a big brain book. So I need to have my big brain hat on, and I just cannot.
Not
I'm just not quite there.
really.
Is it not? I thought, because I feel like, from what I assume of her books, that they have a lot of like layers and meaning.
Yeah.
So I feel like I need to be really ready to pay attention.
Yeah. And by the way, this is the channel I was thinking of. Thank you, Evie. Kindles and Kicks. He did the most phenomenal Kindred review recently. Shout out to that channel and that video. He's just starting out on BookTube, and that video was so good. One of the best reviews I've seen all year. But yeah, so I would say, though, with Kindred, I don't think so. It does have layers to it for sure. It is a book that will make you think. But it's not. The prose style is very straightforward. It's not heavy or dense. It's not a dense read.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it'll be hard for you to read or understand what she's doing with it. She does have a lot of ways of giving you messages about racism. I think she uses time travel as a device to kind of show you how, as much as we think we've progressed from the past, that some of our past continues to linger with us. We've never really escaped some of the shadows of the past and the ways it haunts us, the insidious ways it shows up in the present. And so I think, but she does all that without telling you. Like, she doesn't tell you this is how to think. She doesn't tell you this is what the message is, but it's all there. It's all perfectly there. She shows you. She shows you in a pretty brutal way, but it's a powerful book, and it's not very long. So yeah, I would highly, highly recommend Kindred. Very accessible, yes.
Oh, good.
I do want to read it so badly. I've seen you talk about it before, and I really, really want to read it.
Yeah, I have a thing for time travel books. I don't know what it is. I love time travel in books, and that one is it's one of my favorite of all time when it comes to time travel, because like I said, the time travel has a very specific purpose. And it's not hard science, like, it's not explained. Some people don't even want to call it science fiction, because it's not like the science. The time travel is never explained. It just kind of happens mysteriously in the book. But it's still like, she was amazing, and it was written in 1978. But it's one of those books that stands the test of time. That's just as relevant today as it was when it was written.
I'm just going to say, sci-fi makes me have an existential crisis every single time I read a sci-fi. It just for how it explores like the universe and like how small I feel in the universe. But it sounds like Kindred isn't going to make me feel like that. Okay, good.
No, it's not like that. No, I like this. Yeah, more speculative than sci-fi in some ways. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to disregard its place in sci-fi, because I think she was a sci-fi oriented writer. But I love it. I think it's a masterpiece. Highly recommend. Probably one of my most universally recommended books that I've read.
Well, speculative fiction is a subgenre of sci-fi, is it not?
I don't know. I always thought speculative fiction was just books that we don't really have a category for in the.
I feel like every time I've heard or read a speculative fiction book, it is a sci-fi element, but it's just not the most dominant element in the book. I feel when I have read it in the past, I feel like it always falls more towards sci-fi.
That's a good question. Yeah. How would you define speculative fiction, Gavin? Is there a definition?
You can speculate on it for the rest of the time. It can go anywhere.
That's how I mean, I don't know that I really have the best definition for that.
Yeah, same. But I feel like there's so many books that just don't have any kind of boundary kind of thing. Like, I feel like you can't really label it. Some books are unlabelable. If that makes sense.
Isn't that where we put literary fiction?
Maybe.
When they don't have a label.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. I love books like that, though. I kind of like, I don't know, like, Gavin, you read it all. Like, I think that's perfect.
I say I read it all, but there's still so much that I don't know. Like, I would love to. I feel like I don't have any boundaries when it comes to reading. I will literally read anything, but there are some genres and things that I probably would read a little less. Like I don't read a lot of nonfiction, not because I don't like it or anything, but I just don't really read it all that much.
I have
But
started reading a lot of
oh,
nonfiction, and it's because I walk the dog twice a day and I need something to listen to. And nonfiction audiobooks are the best audiobooks. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Any ones
I
you
didn't realize.
recommend that you've been enjoying
See,
lately?
I would not recommend the nonfiction that I listen to. Like, I do Peloton workouts, and all of the instructors are releasing books, so I just listen to those. And I would never recommend them as a good book. But I am so deeply entrenched in the cult of Peloton that I will listen to them. So yeah, like I've been listening to those. I listened to Brittany's memoir and the girl that was in iCarly. What was her name? I'm
Oh,
glad we're on
Jeanette McCurdy?
that one.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Jeanette
yeah.
McCurdy.
I'm glad I
Yeah.
listened to that last year. Mhm.
And then queued up next, I want to read. I think this was a popular nonfiction, but I'm very new to nonfiction, so I cannot say for sure. But it's called Cultish.
Oh, I
Oh,
listened to
yeah.
that last year.
Yeah, I believe it's really popular, but I'm very new to nonfiction, so I don't know anything
Yeah.
about it aside from that it's about fanaticism and cults, which I
Kind of
find
have mixed feelings
fascinating.
about that particular book, though.
Ooh.
Yeah, I don't think it was the most. I thought in some ways the presentation of the way she organized the information felt like it just needed more. Co- she needed more cohesive points to what
Mhm.
she was saying, and I think maybe her. But she did bring up some interesting food for thought. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that book. I
I'm
kind of
hoping
have
to
some
get
mixed
to
feelings
it.
about it, though. Yeah, yeah, but I
Yeah,
do like
I
cultish stuff, though.
I
yeah, me
like
too, actually. Me too.
I don't have any areas of nonfiction that I feel because I've always said, you know how people have goals like to read more nonfiction. That
Mm.
never makes sense to me as a goal because I feel like if there's something I want to know more about, then I will search out nonfiction in that specific thing as opposed to just wanting to consume nonfiction as a genre. So I'm kind of just like at the minute I'm definitely leaning into like things that are popular because obviously like Britney's memoir was like shocking.
Mm.
So I obviously listened to that, and because I listen still to so little of it, I'm kind of just hitting like the greatest hits of what's currently popular in nonfiction.
Yeah. Actually that's a good point actually. If there's something that I'm very keen in knowing more about, then I will. I'm getting really into like true crime podcasts and stuff like that. But
Oh
I do
yeah.
really want to start reading more true crime nonfiction with any luck.
But then I don't want to overdo it on true crime because I listen to one true crime podcast, but I listen to it every single day.
Yeah.
So I then don't really want to get in. I don't even know where to start with true crime nonfiction because once again, I don't have a special interest within true crime as I just like this one podcast that I listen to.
Yeah.
So
That can be fun. Yeah, I've never listened to true crime before or tried that out.
It's so sad. Like I don't know why I do it because with my patrons I do true crime and wine like every other Sunday, and so we watch a true crime documentary together with wine, and I get sad every single time. I get so upset, and I
that
don't know
is
why I still do it to myself.
That is
I
so
don't know.
funny because at the moment that you said it's so sad, I was about to say serial killers are so fascinating. So like two
They
completely
are,
different
though.
opinions.
Yeah.
The psychology of a serial killer, I love it. I always say that if I'd have ever picked a job based on what I think I would be good at, I think criminal psychology would be amazing because I'm like super good at is it good? I don't know. Like I can find the middle ground in anything. Like I could find the middle ground in like understanding a serial killer's motivations, even though you don't condone the act of serial
Yeah.
killing.
Mhm.
So like
Yeah.
it's a weird one, but I feel like that neutrality would be really good in terms of like a job like that.
I'm the same with Evie. I genuinely thought you were going to say that if you had a job you were good at, it would be serial killer. That's what
I
I thought.
mean,
That's what I thought you were going to
I mean,
say.
I do believe people that have that neutrality are good at being serial killers. I have heard that that's a thing. So
By the
if
way,
you ever start going missing,
I
don't
did
look at
not
me.
know that Cultish was written by the same author as Wordslut. I've never listened or read Wordslut before, but I've heard really good things about that book.
The
Sounded
reason
really
why I
informative.
found Cultish is because she has a new book coming out this year called The Age of Magical Overthinking, which is notes on modern irrationality, which I thought sounded interesting.
Yeah.
And then I looked at her as an author and I saw Cultish and I was like, okay, well, I'll listen to Cultish first. And then if I
Yeah.
like that, then this one comes out in April this year.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, I'd be curious to
not
hear your
long.
thoughts on cultish. I didn't I was talking about this a little bit with a friend because I think the word cultish, she uses it very broadly. Like I think
Mm,
she would even maybe even consider booktube cultish in a
mm,
sense. Like
Mm,
um it doesn't really fall, but apparently there's actually a model, and I didn't know this till I talked to a friend recently. There's actually a model. It's called BITE, which is an acronym, BITE, and it has to do with the model to identify a cult. But she
mhm.
stretches that pretty far. Like she would probably consider the Peloton community. She considers
I
CrossFit.
consider the Peloton community a cult. Like
Okay.
I did marketing at university. That's like what my degree is in. So I can see everything that Peloton does to make you obsessed with it. And yeah, I am still obsessed
Mm,
with it. But I can
yeah.
see it completely as like a marketing model and I still buy into it. Like they are good at what they do. They're very,
Yeah.
very good.
But I think it's still good. It's healthy to kind of consider how we're, maybe unconsciously falling into those sort of patterns or falling for certain psychological patterns for sure.
Mhm.
Because priming is a thing and marketing knows how to capitalize on that, obviously.
I don't know if you guys have watched The Traitors.
Nope.
You haven't watched? Oh, Gavin, I thought you would have. So it's a British TV show. It's like a murder mystery where you have a group of people, and some of them are designated as the traitors. And the traitors' job is to murder the contestants every night, while the contestants are trying to figure out who the traitors are, and the contestants are voting out the traitors. And something that I thought was very interesting about that show is that when they get to the round table every day, which is where they vote out the people they think are the traitors, some of them will go in with no ideas and one person will say like, I think Joanna's the traitor, and then before you know it, everybody is saying that Joanna is the traitor, and only because one person has said it. And the mob mentality and the way that they can all be persuaded to go for one person when they had no reason for thinking that going in is wild. Like it's so
Twitter.
Yikes.
That
interesting.
sounds like Twitter.
I mean, yes, it's the same thing.
That's crazy. That's real though, isn't it? Like things happen like that. That's what the bite stands for. Thank you so much, Matt. Yeah.
Uh,
But it was interesting. I find that stuff so interesting. I read this book through audio, actually immersion wise. I own the physical copy and did both physical and audiobook
Mhm,
called Behave by Robert Sapolsky. I hear from some people that a lot of what he wrote, because I think it is a decade old now, that some of the studies that he refers to in that book maybe have been, are maybe a little outdated. Like maybe there's been more updated research on some of the behavior stuff, but that book was so fascinating to me. Like for example, it goes into like the mushroom, not the mushroom, was it marshmallow? The marshmallow test. You guys heard about that from childhood? Are you familiar with that?
don't think so.
Yeah, so let me
no.
see if I can remember this accurately. They got some kids. This was actually a long time ago they did this. They got some kids and they put a mushroom. Why do I keep saying mushroom? A marshmallow on a plate. And they left them alone and they said, "We're gonna give you this marshmallow. And if you don't eat it, then we're gonna get after 10 minutes, we're gonna give you a second one. We're gonna reward your good behavior. But if you
Mhm.
eat it, you don't get one. You don't get the reward." And so they filmed these kids, and it was really funny because some of the kids like had different strategies, like sitting on their hands, and some kids like licked it, and
Oh.
some kids like nibbled a little bit, and some kids really succeeded. They did not touch that marshmallow, and they got their
Wow.
reward. And some kids weren't able to do it. They weren't able to pass the marshmallow test. And what they did is they did at a follow-up study of these kids later in life into adulthood, and they found that as adults, the ones who didn't pass the marshmallow test had a much harder time in life. They made
Mm.
much more impulsive decisions. They
Mhm.
they weren't able to keep their finances in order as easily. The ones who passed the marshmallow test, on the other hand, might have done a lot better. So,
See,
I
you
don't
said
think I would have been
impulsive.
one of those kids.
You said
I would not have
impulsive
passed.
decisions, and I just looked at Gavin.
I mean, what can I say? You know what? Funny story. This is totally between us, between friends. I recently, I don't know why I did this. I knew I couldn't go, but there was a convention and a few people I really wanted to see were going. So I paid for a meet and greet with them, except it was in a different country and I knew I couldn't go because my passport is expired. And yet I still paid for it because I thought I want to go. So I paid for it, but I knew I couldn't go. So I just lost a lot of money. That is how
Oh.
bad I am. I would fail the marshmallow test.
Let me just
I would have
say that this
grabbed
is
it out of
this is
her
one of the
hands.
reasons, one of the ways that me and Gavin are not the same
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
I have
person.
no
Yep.
idea. It's possible I would have failed too. Who knows? But
Yeah.
it's
I
interesting. But
just.
that book is full of things like little things that you wouldn't expect. Like for example, they did another test on if you met somebody for the first time, and if the people were holding a cold drink in their hands, and then they shook hands upon their first meeting, they would perceive that person to be colder in nature than if their hands were warm. Like weird things. Like I don't know.
Um,
Like I said, I've heard that there are certain studies in the book that maybe have been updated since, but Robert Sapolsky is still a very highly regarded researcher. He just came out with a new book that's on a related topic on free will, like whether we have it. So I need to pick that up at some point. But I love that stuff. Like that
they're
stuff is
also
so
kind of
fascinating.
scary though, because I don't want to know if we have free will or
I
not. Like, I'd
know.
just rather not. I just in case the answer's no.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
Abercrombie
I'd
is
rather
right.
not know. Yeah.
So I saw you were reading First Law, Becca, and
Yeah,
that was one of the challenges with it because it is kind of, I mean, it's humorous, so it's not nihilistic in like a dark, ugly sense, but
yeah, but
it is
it's
kind of
really
sad. Yeah.
it's demotivating is the way that I said it best. Like getting really invested, especially coming from reading like the Cosmere and the Realm of the Adlings, and then going into Joe Abercrombie, who the point of everything is that it's pointless. I'm like,
Yeah.
thanks. Really love that.
I know. Yeah, because it's kind of satirical. It's
Yeah.
satirical fantasy because in fantasy we're used to the hero's journey. We're used to seeing
Mhm,
that progress and people beating the odds and
mhm.
defying all expectations. And Abercrombie's like, well, actually, people can't really change in a way.
Yeah.
I would love to read an Abercrombie book. Funny story. 10 years ago, I met Joe Abercrombie. I think he just released Half a King, and he was doing a book signing in Newcastle, which is near where I live. And I had no idea who he was. And I still haven't read any of his books, but I'm the kind of person who I see an author do a signing. And if I feel like they don't have enough people there, I'll just like get in line and I'll be like, oh, I just want to make sure that they feel loved and like they feel like they've got like a long line of people and stuff. And obviously, like it's Joe Abercrombie, so like he doesn't need that kind of thing, right? But I did the same thing with Sarah J. Maas. And I had, again, at the time, I had no idea who she was. And it's funny because I'm so good at meeting these authors and pretending that I know their books and things. So I was really nice, but still, like, he was lovely. It was so nice. And I was like, "Oh, you really inspire me." And I was like, "I haven't read a single book he's written, and I still haven't. I would love to, but yeah, that was my little anecdote."
I love that story, but I just love how sweet you are, Gavin, that you haven't read anything you wanted to make Abercrombie feel better.
Yeah.
Ah,
Well,
that's too
to be fair,
sweet.
I mean, I'm trying to remember now. I feel like because it was a little bit of a smaller store, I don't think it was because Joe Abercrombie wasn't popular. It was just because it's a bit of a, it's not really a big popular store or anything. But yeah, there was some who I can't remember their names now, who, because I worked for Waterstones for a while too. So I would see an author sitting maybe on their lonesome, and I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to pretend I know their books. I'll quickly do a little research. I'll look online, see what people have been saying. And then I'll go up to them and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I love this book so much. Like, you know what I mean? So I'll get caught out one of these days. I bet you one of them will go, so what did you think about this character? And I'll be like, yeah, I loved him. And she'll be like, well, he killed everyone. Like,
Oh
yeah, I
no.
loved him.
So what did you think of yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
actually, Abercrombie has a way of making those same characters lovable in an odd
That is
way.
true. That is true.
So, yeah, I would say with Abercrombie, Becca, I'd love to hear your experience. For me, with the first trilogy, the First Law trilogy, I when I read the first book, I wasn't super hooked into the first book. We were talking about DNFing earlier. I
Mm.
did, of course, didn't DNF it, but I did find my investment. in that trilogy didn't really take off for me personally till the second book. And the second book surprised me so much because at that point in my reading journey, I was thinking, I'm definitely one of those people that needs not just good characters, but a really like plot focused story. And then book two in that series, Before They Are Hanged, completely proved me wrong because I realized I don't even care what we're doing with this plot or what the mission is. I just love these characters so much that I'm just happy to be here with these characters. They're so much fun.
I do
So
kind of agree, but the thing that drives me crazy about the first Law books is that he makes you believe that there's a plot. It's not that there isn't a plot. It's that he does a really good job. He works really hard to convince you that there is. And I'm like, my guy, if you're working this hard, you might as well just give me the actual plot. Please.
That's a good point.
But, yeah, the first book I enjoyed. I felt the first book, I was kind of invested because when I'm reading adult fantasy, epic fantasy books where I know it's an extended series, I'm not necessarily expecting there to be the most plot in book one. Like, I
That's
have read
true.
series before where the first book is just set up, like that one is. The second one was definitely my favorite. The third one was disappointing because ultimately you find out potentially there isn't a plot. But then I don't really like the standalones as much, and then I'm currently up to the short stories. I'm really excited for the second trilogy because I still really did like the first trilogy. So I'm excited to get into the second trilogy, but I'm not a fan of short stories, so at the minute I'm not feeling great about the first Law universe because that's what I have to read next.
I haven't read honestly, I skipped the short stories. I need to come back and read them
If it
because I'm
wasn't
the
for the
same
book club,
way.
I would
I
also be tempted to skip them.
Yeah, I also am just not a fan of short stories. Like it takes I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try this year to read some short story collections, but it's really hard for me to get into them. But I can tell you, like for me personally, the second trilogy, the Age of Madness trilogy, the final installment, the last three books in First Law World, favorite. One of my favorite series now of all time. Like I loved it that much. And it is so different in change of pace and
Can
female
I
characters. Amazing.
just ask though,
Yeah.
is there a plot?
Yes. Yes.
We do get a plot. So the thing that I
Yeah,
think is a plot is actually a plot.
maybe.
Like
There's
the
like
thing that's happening the entire way through
You're
is
making
actually
Joanna second guess herself now.
now, well, everything does build off itself,
okay,
like
cool.
with the first trilogy. Okay, I
Because
think I know what you're saying.
I was
Yeah.
just really upset that potentially I would continue to read only to find out at the end of the next trilogy that there still isn't a plot. So
Yeah, well, I'm not okay, so I don't really expect a when it comes to Joe Abercrombie's endings, like what
mhm,
the promise of a plot kind of thing, I don't really put a lot of energy or investment into that because
yeah,
of what he's done before. And so I felt happy with the way that the last trilogy ended personally, but I know some people felt like there were some loose ends still. So I just want to be honest about that in
mhm,
case that bothers you when you read the second trilogy. But I did feel like there were almost like three kind of storylines overlapping in that third
okay,
trilogy, if I remember correctly. And but the female characters, oh my gosh, they're so good. I thought. Like I just adored them. There are three main female characters that are just huge standouts in that last trilogy. And I loved and I thought the pacing was quite a bit faster. There were a
mhm.
lot more things that happened.
I
So I
think the
hope you
worry
enjoy
as
it.
well going into that series was that he hasn't said that he's definitely done. So we didn't know whether
Oh,
it's going to conclude with this trilogy or whether there'll potentially be more added on because he hasn't said that he's continuing, but he also hasn't said that he's definitively done. So
yeah.
potentially in the future there could be more First Law books.
Maybe I wouldn't be I wouldn't be upset if he did write more for Slaw. Sorry.
This is why I need to like really get myself into gear for reading these adult fantasies and these great adult books because I would love to be able to talk about all of that too. Like one of the reasons why I love Becca's Catch Up Book Club as well is because she goes through the ones that I'm kind of scared to read myself. And it was funny because Becca's book club was the first book club I was ever invited to be part of
I
on
was just
BookTube
gonna
too.
say, because you said like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I wish I could read these series." And I'm like, "Well, you could if you hadn't have left the book club."
Yeah, but the thing is, right, the thing is, whenever I have to read it by a certain point, that's when I struggle the most. So, like, we did A Song of
Oh.
Ice and Fire when I joined BookTube, so that was the first time reading A Song of Ice and Fire, and it was great. Love the book club. The book club was absolutely fabulous. But reading the books by a certain point, especially adult fantasy books, by a certain point, I'm like, and then you wanted to do Robin Hobb right after it, didn't you, Becca? Like, wasn't that the one right
Mhm.
after? I'm like, you're expecting me to read all of Robin Hobb by a certain point. There's like 90
But
books in the Elderlings, and
but
I'm
no,
like,
I've read Robin Hobb and you haven't.
yeah,
Wouldn't you
I know,
rather have read Robin Hobb?
yes, of course, but I bet you we would have had to have pushed every single live show back because I wouldn't have finished it on time, and it would have just been an absolute nightmare.
Gavin, I give you two
I'm a
months per
diva,
book.
okay? I'm a
2 months.
diva. That's still too much for me.
Right,
And I
Murphy?
do
Like,
read.
he's just being a baby.
I know, but it's like when it's Robin Hobb, like that name itself just tells you everything you need to know.
And now,
Robin Hobb,
literally, do you
Abercrombie.
know anybody at this point who hasn't read Robin Hobb apart from you?
Uh-oh.
Actually, no. No, actually, I think
Were
everyone
you
has.
the only
I'm
person that
I'm left
didn't
behind.
participate in my read along?
See, also, I had the idea of trying to read all of Robin Hobb in one video at one point in time. Obviously, I'm
What?
not going to do that. Obviously, I'm not,
That would
because
be a
that's just ridiculous.
wow. That would be
It
like
would be
how
a
many hours vlog?
That would be a quick way to depression as well.
Oh, wow.
Exactly. I would not be able to do anything else. I actually wanted to do all of Wheel of Time in one video. This is the thing. I went through a phase on BookTube where I prevented myself from reading because I wanted to do everything in one video. Like, that was my thing.
Um,
I can't read that because I want to do it all in one video, and can't do that because I'm very unpredictable. Let's just say
See, but
I
the
can't
difference
predict my
between
mind.
most people and Gavin is most people would say, I can't do that all in one video, so I'll read one book every 2 months.
No, I
But
can't do
Gavin's
that
like one
either.
video or not at all.
wow. All in or none at all. All or nothing. Is that what it is?
Pretty much. Pretty much. It's just like the idea of having to read it for like a book club, because yeah,
I can
that
understand
also,
that. Yeah.
yeah,
The
because I
thing about
also
the
like,
book clubs though is that they keep me accountable, because would I be 7 books into Wheel of Time if I wasn't co-hosting a Wheel of Time read along?
Oh.
Absolutely not.
you would have given up by now, right?
I would have given up by now. It would have been one of those series where I said, oh yeah, like I will continue, and then 5 years have passed and I haven't.
What made you decide to pick up Wheel of Time, by the way?
Because it's one of the biggest, most well-known fantasy series. I really like to read the origins of fantasy so that I can see the influences. Like, from the first book of Wheel of Time, I saw a lot of things that were similar. Obviously, it's reversed because Wheel of Time came first, but there's similar elements in the realm of the Elderlings and also Game of Thrones. And I like to be able to make those connections, also try and figure out like who came first, like what influences modern fantasy, and like how many steps removed from like the origin it is and things like that. Like, there's a lot you can trace back to things like Earthsea and Lord of the Rings.
Definitely, definitely. Oh, that's wonderful. I love doing that as well. I was just
Yeah.
curious though, because for whatever reason, I just don't have any motivation to read Wheel of Time. And it
I
probably doesn't help.
personally would not
But
recommend it. I'm not enjoying it very much.
yeah.
I do think, though, I believe that it has good payoff. And the thing that's gotten me through it, a lot of it as well, is knowing that Brandon Sanderson is the one that finishes the series. Because if Brandon Sanderson, knowing what I know of Sanderson, if he is the right person to write the end of this series, then Wheel of Time probably has a very intricate plot.
Mm.
It's just I don't love Robert Jordan's writing style. I find him to be very long-winded and repetitive, and I don't like a lot of his relationships. A lot of it is just because of the time that they were written, like the way some of the characters behave. But yeah, the writing style can be like he talks in circles a lot and repeats the same things over and over again, but the plot works really good.
Yeah. I know there are a lot of fans out there of Wheel of Time. I enjoyed Wheel of Time quite a bit, even though I had some issues with the series. Yeah, definitely. I hear those things about when it was written come through quite a bit. Yeah. Now I'm
Going back
really
to what we
curious
talked about
though.
before, yeah.
I would love to hear your thoughts on Robin Hobb, though, Gavin, even though I've only read the first trilogy. But maybe you could
It
do a
will happen.
trilogy at a time. You could do like a vlog of just one trilogy or one
That would make a whole lot of
sub-series.
sense. But then I think, yeah, I could do that, or I could just do all of them. You know what I mean? It's like, I think my brain sometimes goes into what would be more unique, doing it by trilogy or doing all of Robin Hobb in one video? Like, can you imagine someone uploads a video? Probably won't be me. Like, I read all of Robin Hobb in 1 month, or it's just like a whole vlog dedicated to that. And it's like, it's why I wanted to do Wheel of Time too. I was like, I want to do a Wheel of Time and read it all in 1 week thing. It's like,
Gavin,
I
the
love
audiobooks for
challenges.
Wheel of Time are 30 hours each.
That's wild.
So 1 week, 1 week easy. 1 week easy. Double
No,
speed
you
it.
would have to, if you listen
No
to them
sleep.
on 2 times speed, you would have to listen to more than 30 hours a day. There aren't 30 hours in a day. It's not possible.
Says who? There's 30 hours in a day for me. I work myself to the bone. I work 30 hours a week. No, 30 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's what I do.
Wow. And you
What
said you
do you
don't
want?
sleep very much, right? You don't sleep
Yeah, I
very much?
don't. To be honest, I don't. I don't waste my time sleeping half the time. No, I would love to. I would love to sleep. I would absolutely love to sleep. But it's just something that I find the hardest thing in the world, which is weird. It's like I find sleep harder than pretty much like anything else I do. But I love challenges. I love challenge videos, and I just sometimes I think I could be that person. I could be that person. I'll be the
I
Mr.
am
Beast of BookTube.
living for Murphy reading you for filth in the
Miffy
in the
always
comments.
reads me for filth. Always.
As
It
she
is
should,
useless.
as should everybody. You are on a fast track to a mental breakdown, and I told you this before.
But
Oh, man.
challenges are fun.
I'm waiting.
Oh,
I'm just gonna be waiting for that Robin Hobb video from you now.
I know. It's in there. It's in there saying I can't ever rest until it's done.
Oh,
It could be the
wow.
You
weirdest thing.
literally
It could be
won't
the
rest
weirdest
until
challenge
it's
I need to
done
do it.
if you start.
Literally, I did a sleeper train video, because one night at 2 o'clock in the morning, I was just scrolling YouTube. I got recommended someone in Japan on a sleeper train, and I was like, oh God, I'd love to go on a sleeper train. Now I want to book a sleeper train. Now I want to make a video on a sleeper train. But how can I make that sleeper train video related to BookTube? I know, I'll read a book on a sleeper train. And then I booked it pretty much nearly straight away because I had to do it because I thought of it. This is just my brain.
That's amazing. So you get creative ideas everywhere you go and think, how can I relate that to books? How can I relate that
Yeah,
to BookTube?
Yeah, it's like I
That's
watch a lot of
cool.
paranormal YouTubers on YouTube. I love paranormal investigative videos. So I'm like, how can I make that BookTube related? I do that all the time, but it's terrible as well because I can't afford to do that, and yet I do it anyway. You know what I mean? It's like, I love the creativity behind making videos. It makes me so happy, but I can't afford to do that. You know what I mean?
Oh,
But I
wow.
do it anyway.
But
Yeah,
he
so it's
also won't
terrible.
stop doing it. So
can't.
there's no point trying
I
to tell
can't.
him to.
You know what? The only way that I would stop doing it is if I go onto my YouTube studio right now and click delete channel. That's the only way I would stop. And sometimes I need to be stopped. So
Do you have an
maybe one
adult
day.
bedtime yet? Oh no, you don't. You said you're up till 4 in the morning. Still no adult bedtime.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I've got 2 children to look after as well. So that keeps me up quite a lot too. I mean, I know they're cats, but they need a lot of attention.
They should have
My
a
cat
baby
was just
bedtime.
meowing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, bless.
Mine go to sleep. My cat and my dog are asleep about 7, 8 p.m. and
Oh,
they'll
wow.
sleep right through till the morning.
Wow.
Yeah.
My cat has
You got
had
good
this
children.
horrible habit of like every time I roll on my back, he takes that as an invitation to sleep on my stomach. I'm like, no. Yeah.
No, my cat Hamilton, he has his dinner and then he pretty much sleeps then until 7 in the morning. He might get up for a walk around about 10 and then go straight back to sleep.
Wow.
Wow. What a life.
Oh, Evie wants you to read Spirit Cuts Through Water. Well, both of you, I guess, right? Evie.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, to
I've
Becca
never read
and
it.
Gavin. Yeah.
Spirit.
I read it. It's
Wait, so
weird
did you not love
because
it?
I did a review of it. So here's the thing.
Oh, is it Simon Jimenez?
Yeah, Simon Jimenez.
I have, is it Vanished
The
Birds by
Vanished
Simon
Birds, yeah.
Jimenez that I haven't
Yeah.
read yet?
I really liked that book. Yeah. So with The Spirit Cuts Through Water, this is the weird thing. So I could talk at length about how well written that book is. I did a review and I just had so many positive things to say because I do think that his prose is very, very skillful. I think he's doing so many different unique things with the book. And I appreciated it. And I liked the ending quite a bit. But I do have some buts with that book. Like there were some things that I just had a hard time feeling grounded in the story, first of all, because we're going from
Mm.
second person narration to into a framed narrative story, like an inner story that goes into third person and first person. A lot of italicized quotes breaking the fourth wall with people talking to you. It's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in the book, and it's very well done. It's well executed. I just had a hard time feeling grounded in the story as a
Mm.
result of a lot of
Yeah.
things. And there's a lot we were talking about grim content earlier and not being triggered very easily. It's not that I was triggered reading the book, but some of the graphic stuff um did feel kind of I don't know, is that what triggered is? I felt unsettled by it.
Mm.
And I also found here's the thing I've learned about myself when it comes to reading. I'm sorry, Evie, you wanted me to pitch this book, and I'm like giving all these things about why it wasn't a favorite for me. One thing I've realized I don't like in books is nasty smells. And there's like a whole long
Oh,
section of that book where there's a nasty smell. Actually, a couple of nasty smells. There are a couple of nasty things. And I just
Wow.
realized
that sounds
I
so
don't like
ominous.
nasty smells in books. Like it doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
But
I
it's a well
don't
written book.
And you,
the innocuous thing that bothers me is people breaking nails in books.
Oh,
Grady Hendrix has a lot of nails
I
in
can't
books.
stand that.
true.
And like
Yeah.
throwing a glass, she was breaking her nails like
Oh,
every
I
10
can't stand
minutes.
it. I can't
No.
stand. I think there's something like that in this book too. And I was like, no, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. I can't. I can't. Yeah. No, that bothers me
Wait,
too. I'm getting stressed thinking
so
about it.
can you smell the nasty smells? Or
I
is it just like the way
can.
it's described? Like the
I
way it's
don't
described is so good.
That's a good question. I think I am imagining the smells and it bothers me and it's really weird. So
That's
I'm somebody
good
who
though.
I definitely
That's good.
visualize what I'm definitely somebody who visualizes what I read, but yeah, I've noticed that smells can really make or break a story for me. Sounds too. I could
Ooh.
hear like I feel like sounds are a powerful thing in a story. And Jimenez loves to make his books very sensory, but there
Mhm.
was so much
Mhm.
sensory stuff in that book that just made me very unsettled. But it's a
Ooh.
well-written book and it's very popular and everybody's loving it. So, yeah, you
I
might like
can't
it.
buy a book by an author if I have a book by the author that I haven't read yet. So until I read
Ah,
Vanished Birds, I can't read this one.
yeah.
I'll buy anything. So I'll buy it.
I
Yeah,
was
It's
actually in
fine.
a
Or I'll
bookstore.
check my library.
I was in a bookstore in New York when I got Vanished Birds, and Aaron from Booked and Busy, like we met up and we were book
Oh,
shopping,
cool.
and she
Yeah.
got somebody to run up 2 flights of stairs to bring me this book that Aaron demanded that I had to read. Like this, you're going to give this book 5 stars. You can thank me later. It's amazing. I found out 2 weeks later that Aaron hasn't even read the book.
What is the book?
It's The Vanished Birds.
Oh, no way. She hasn't read it and
Yeah,
she told you to read it.
yeah. And she got somebody to run up 2 flights of stairs for it. So I was like, well, I have to have it now. She hadn't even read it.
That's so Aaron.
It is very Aaron, and I just
I
bought it on faith and was like, okay, yeah, it's going to be amazing.
I thought it was a good book.
Hmm.
I liked it a lot. I hope you like it.
I hope I do as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I just feel kind of conflicted because like sometimes like that book, like the Spirit Cuts Through Water, I had a whole discussion with Evie about it, Evie and Sarah Reed, and wow, like we had so many amazing things to talk about with that book. Like we talked easily for an hour about so many great things, and at the
Mhm.
same time, when I was reading it, I had a hard time. Like I had a hard time picking it up. So
Yeah.
that's I don't know what to make of that. Like I don't know what to make of that.
But sometimes books are like that. Sometimes like a book is not a good book or a book you enjoyed, but you can talk about it forever.
Yeah.
True. In fact, I feel like I can talk more about books that if I love a book, I find it harder to talk about because I'm just gushing about it. I don't have anything nuanced to say about it sometimes. But if it's like a bit strange, if it's a little bit confusing, I feel like I do have more to say. It's
Yeah.
weird.
I
I feel
love
like
having a lot to
four-star books
say.
for me tend to be ones that you can talk about a lot, because you can talk about all the things that you enjoyed about them, but also the reasons why you didn't give it 5 stars.
Mm.
I like talking against myself when it comes to my reading experience, I guess. That's my conclusion. I'm like, I had a hard time reading this book, but I could talk about all the good things it's doing. It makes no sense. Very confusing, I know. Maybe that's
I
it,
have
maybe.
I have so many tabs open now from all of your recommendations today.
Uh,
People, books, loads of things. So many tabs now.
all right. Yeah, a lot of people here though love the book though. Yeah, and there was another live stream earlier for the book for Spirit Cuts Through Water. Everybody was gushing about it. It's a very popular book. So
I feel like Simon
I,
Jimenez is proving to be a very popular author. I need to
yeah.
jump on that.
I do think he's a very skilled writer. I really do stand behind that. I think he's actually a very skilled writer as far as like his prose style. He writes in a lyrical way, but still very accessible and still very like keeps you in the action, keeps the momentum moving. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
he has a lot of description, but he never loses the movement of the story. And I think that's hard to do. So I think he does
Mm.
that really,
mm.
really well. Yeah. For hours about
So Murder More Than Ladylike is a middle grade series that's a mystery series, and it's not that bad. It's not that bad. I did a middle grade book club with Chris from Tales and Tomes years ago, and that's what she's referring to. It's not that bad.
yeah.
I second Murphy's recommendation. Annihilation is very good. Just don't
Have you
expect to have a clue what's happening.
have you read the whole trilogy? Isn't that a trilogy?
Yes. It was a while ago, so I don't remember the specifics now, but I think I know I gave Annihilation 5 stars, and then books 2 or 3 I didn't give lower than 4 stars, if not 5.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that Murphy just put out a vlog of this, and so I'm like, I need to check
Hmm.
this out.
I added it to
Definitely
my
need to
watch
read
later,
this.
but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
It's
Definitely I need to read this
Jeff
trilogy.
Vandermeer. It is Jeff Vandermeer, right? Jeff
Yeah.
Vandermeer? Yeah.
It's weird as well, because this is the kind of book that I would never normally like, because you have no idea what's happening as it's happening. You just kind of have to roll with it. And normally I'm not about that. Like I have to know what's happening and why. But for some reason in Annihilation, like it just works. I wouldn't recommend the film though. The film is weird in a different way,
Oh,
and I didn't love that.
I didn't realize there was a film on that.
It
Yeah.
was a
Actually, me
Netflix
neither.
one, but I don't think it did the best. I think it was a Netflix film. I watched it on Netflix.
Yeah.
I have Hummingbird is
Yes, I think it's
Jeff
something about that.
Vandermeer.
I
Hummingbird
have
Salamander. Yeah, it sounds odd. It
I
sounds
have
very odd.
Dawn that I haven't read yet, and I think
Mm.
that's got like a flying bear and also like an octopus. And the octopus I think is called Dawn. He's Jeff
Is
Vandermeer. I want to take the drugs that he has taken, because there must be some. There must be some.
I
Wow.
was gonna say there must be something behind that, because it sounds every single book is a bit strange. I like strange books
I do
though, so
too. I do too.
I need to get on that. Yeah.
You liked Uzumaki. I saw that in your favorite books. So that's pretty strange.
Which one?
Uzumaki.
Oh gosh, yes, that
It's so
was
good.
so good. Yeah,
It is
it was so
really
good,
good.
so twisted and so
So
many. Yeah,
disturbing.
we were talking about things that trigger us and stuff. Like I wasn't triggered or anything, but it did make me feel repulsed a lot of the times in Uzumaki. Yeah,
See, that's Junji Ito, isn't it? Is that the spiral one?
yeah,
I
that's the
Yes.
spiral
read
one.
my first Junji Ito was Goyo, and I was so put
Ah,
off. I will never read any other Junji Ito, even though I know that it was specifically Goyo that like put me off. I didn't even want that one either. The manga was on 3 for 2 at my local comic book store, and they didn't have Uzumaki, so I got Goyo instead.
mm.
Wow.
Oh, you need to
No,
though. It was like
that got
it's
way
better.
too human centipede for me personally.
Well, Uzumaki is like totally different though. It's
I
so
know, but
good.
it's just every time I think of Junji Ito now, I think about that. Do you know, like the back end page image of the like? I just
Yes,
can't.
I know
I
exactly what
can't.
you're talking about. Yeah,
It's not the intrusive
disgusting.
thoughts I need.
It is pretty gross and it is pretty
Yeah.
weird. It's
Hmm.
dizzying. It's wild. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I ended up reading all of Junji Ito for a video, because again, I love doing things that take me too long to do in one thing. But Junji Ito's great, but I kind of love Blood on the Tracks a little bit more, maybe,
I want
which
to
is
read
a
that because of
series.
your recommendation, but I'm a shoujo manga girly. Like I like my
Mm,
contemporary romance manga, which is weird because I don't
yeah.
read a lot of, especially because I like YA contemporary manga, and I don't
Mm.
read YA contemporary books pretty much at all. But that's my favorite type of like comic and manga to read.
Oh, interesting. Do you
Oh,
have any
interesting.
recommendations for contemporary?
Ooh, Orange
Oh, I
by
love
Mm.
that.
yeah,
That's like one of my
Orange.
favorite things ever. I love orange.
Dream and
Yay.
Sun by the same person is pretty good, but not quite as hard hitting. Also has a little bit of questionable content in the way that like manga from the early 2000s does. Um, what else? Oh, I Want to Eat Your Pancreas if you like hard hitting stuff.
Okay.
That's about a girl who has pancreatic cancer and
Wow.
nobody at school knows, and she leaves her diary in the hospital and a boy picks it up and finds out, so she makes him be her best friend because nobody else knows, and it's good to have like one person that knows about it. And then that author also has, I think that's Yoru Samino, also has another one that's called, is it If I Were You or If We Were There or something like that. Oh, I have not read Snow White with Red Hair, but now I'm going to look
I've
that
read the
up.
first volume of Snow White with the Red Hair, and I was a little bit confused. I was a bit confused. There was so much going on in the first volume, I couldn't really wrap my head around it. I don't think it was for me, but I might continue one day. It was just a little confusing. For then again, I'm not that like big brained when it comes to a lot of books and stuff. So maybe it was just me. Maybe it's just me.
The
Interesting.
other one by Yoru Samino is I Had That Same Dream Again, and that is about a girl who is given an assignment at school, which is what is the meaning of happiness? And she asks her three friends, one is an old lady, one is a woman like in her 20s, and one is a high school student, what happiness means to them so that she can try and like figure it out on her own. All of Yoru Samino's mangas have a twist that always shocks me. So
That's cool. That sounds fun. Yeah. I loved Orange. I read that a couple years ago. That was my first manga ever that I
oh
read.
wow.
And I haven't read very much manga.
There's a new volume out. Have you seen?
Is there really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Then
So
maybe
you
I'll
know
have
there's
to.
the two volumes of Orange and then there's is it Orange Future? Which is
Oh,
like a
yeah.
little one that's like I think that's the future that
Okay.
would have happened if they hadn't changed anything. And now there's a volume that's the future that happens based on the things that they changed, I think.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I
Cool.
haven't
Then
got
I'm
that
gonna
one
have to
yet.
look into that. I had no idea. I was actually thinking about Orange after finishing the Lonely Castle in the Mirror because I was like, this kind of reminds me of Orange. Like it gives me those kind of vibes in a way.
Yeah.
And of course, they're both Japanese, but it was making me think about the because there's that theme of friendship and
Mhm.
Japanese culture tends to be much more of like community driven, I think, whereas we're more
Yes, for sure.
individualistic. So there's kind of a different sort of take on those things. So I don't know, it just made me think a lot about that. So that's nice. I'm gonna have to check that out.
I
I
hope
need
you
less manga recommendations because I have way too many that I've started the first volume and not continued. And
oh
I
see,
need to get on more
I just read Fruits
fantasy.
Basket Volume 1 and I didn't love it.
Mm.
Oh
I
no.
I
know
didn't
it's a
love it
very,
either.
very popular one.
I didn't love it either.
Um, I don't know. Did you read past Volume 1, Gavin?
No, just volume one. It didn't feel like it was for me. It felt very high school in a way. Like a lot of it focused on a lot of things that I didn't want to read
Mm.
in that series. I like the concept of it, but it was focusing a little bit too much on like high school and stuff like that. I was like, not for
See,
me.
for me, I don't know why I didn't like it very much, but I want to know whether it gets better with every volume or whether what you get in Volume 1 is the same kind of thing that you can expect from.
Hmm.
Okay, right. Okay, well, I just won't then.
So
Thanks,
don't
but
read it.
that's essentially what I needed to know because I didn't know if it was one that gets better with every volume or whether what you get in Volume 1 is what you can pretty much expect from every other volume. So,
Hmm.
yeah, thank you. I will be unhauling Volume 1.
Oh,
I
that's
think
too
I will too.
bad. It is popular though. I do hear about that one a lot.
Mainly, all I
Yeah,
hear about it is that it's everyone's favorite series.
Huh.
yeah, a lot of booktubers, like original booktubers as well. I think Clockwork Reader, I think it's
Mm.
like her favorite manga or something. So I see people who don't usually read manga love Fruits Basket, and I'm like, well, I'm glad that they love it. I'm really glad
Mm.
I didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't gotten into manga so much lately though, because ever since moving into my house, like I don't live near a local library anymore. And that was
Mhm.
primarily
Mhm.
how I would check out manga from the library because they can get
Mm.
expensive.
They
So
can.
sadly,
Have
yeah, so sadly I'm just not really
have
reading much manga anymore.
have either of you thought about starting One Piece or anything? Like maybe giving that a go?
That's the
Maybe.
main reason I haven't is because like I think I would have to check it out through the library and that would be a lot of trips. Maybe
Which is great. More trips to the library, the better, if you ask
that's
me.
true.
I have learned that there is kind of like a sweet spot for me. I like long series, but
Mm.
I don't like long episodic series.
It's
Um,
not episodic. One Piece isn't episodic. Just saying.
Really? I thought all
It's a
manga
narrative.
was fairly episodic. Not in a bad way, but I kind of thought that was the way manga was structured.
I feel like if there's more than 20 installments of something, no, that's it's just
You could read that in one day. So you won't read like 20 volumes of a manga, which you'll get through in like 2 or 3 days, but you will read Robin Hood.
But do you remember that I said when I read manga and comics, I read YA contemporary romance?
Yes, but like One Piece is YA contemporary romance.
I actually don't like fantasy manga or comics all that much, and I think it's because
What?
when I read fantasy, I want it to be
Hmm.
super detailed and gritty. And obviously
Okay.
you don't get that with manga because there's less text and there's other ways to display it, and it's not that it's less developed, it's just the information is presented differently. And I like my fantasy information to be presented in like 500 pages of info dumping about a world.
So
Whereas
strange.
for
Oh,
contemporary romance, especially like YA, I don't need 300 pages. I just need some text and some pretty pictures. And that's all I need to get the vibe of the story. Like reading a full novel of YA contemporary romance is too much. Like manga's a sweet spot, you know.
All right, Gavin. Gavin, go ahead. Go. Why One Piece? Why should everybody read One Piece?
Murphy said you're a
because it's
liar,
the
so I'm
great.
guessing it is episodic.
Yeah.
No, she's saying liar because it's not a contemporary young adult romance. Which is
Uh,
when you said that's all you read, I was like,
also,
but yeah, it's not episodic, but it's the greatest story ever told. That should be reason enough.
I
Like,
did
I
like
mean,
Dick Fight Island. I did like
Dick
that.
Fight Island is fantastic. Dick Fight Island is probably like my next favorite series other than One Piece.
My
So
criticism of it is that it felt like they really rushed the plot. They could have spread that out over
yeah.
multiple volumes. I did say I'm not in a rush to read volume 2, but if I ever got my hands on it, like if it ever appeared or I found it secondhand, then I would. But I really hope I don't find it secondhand because those poor old ladies in the charity shops, if that's in their secondhand.
Oh, bless them. Yeah, we don't want that. It's a great series. I think well, you should read that, and yeah,
I
great
might
story ever
have to
told.
check it
Do
out
you actually
someday.
want me to go through why I think you guys should read like properly? I feel like Joanna, you must be like so sick of everyone reading One Piece at the minute. Are you not?
I'm not sick of it. I'm out of the conversation. So I'm
It's
like,
weird
well,
because, like, for me, I'm so confident in my decision that I'm not interested in One Piece. I actually don't think anybody could convince me to read it because I've never seen anything about One Piece that is appealing to me and the things that I like.
It has
Apart from
everything that
maybe
you love.
pirates, but like there's some pirates I like and some that I don't like, so I don't feel
Okay,
like him.
you like adventure. You like
I
adventure.
don't
You
like
love world
adventure stories.
building.
I'm reading like an Indiana Jones type book at the minute, and like action is so boring, man. Like, give me 300 pages just like riding horses and banter.
That's pretty much One Piece as well. They're on ships.
They put
They
horses on the
travel on
boat.
ships. They have amazing banter. You know, that's exactly what One Piece is, except change the horses to boats, to ships, and islands.
I am
Islands
curious
with cake.
though. I am curious. I'm curious.
Yeah, I feel bad because the past year and a bit I don't want to be forceful with anyone with recommending it and stuff. I feel like I've probably gotten a
Oh.
bad rep now about it. So
No, I asked
I know
you.
I've
I
tried
asked
so
you.
hard.
So no,
That's
I
true.
wanted you to
That's
feel
true.
free to share your love of One Piece. So yeah.
Okay,
It's funny
thank you.
because I will shout about Red Rising at every opportunity, and I don't feel bad about it. Like, you like Red Rising, or you're wrong, and they're the only options.
Have you read the
I feel bad about it.
Go
Sorry.
ahead, I'm
I was gonna say
sorry.
I feel bad about recommending things over and over again sometimes. I'm like,
Nah.
I'm sorry, like because it was the same thing when I loved Frost Heart by Jamie Littler as the middle grade. Like I bet you Becca is like dying inside, like, oh, not Frost Heart again, jeez. But it's like my favorite middle grade series ever. In I think between 2019 in 2021, I was just nonstop talking about it. And I just feel like people get sick of hearing me recommend the same thing over and over. So I'm like, oh, I feel bad. I feel bad for you guys.
I don't think so. I love hearing people being passionate about what they love. So you're
Mm,
always welcome to share what you're passionate about. I want to hear it. Like that's exciting to me, you know? So I
true.
don't know if I'll
Same.
get to I don't know if I'll get to One Piece anytime soon because of the library challenge. But yeah, I mean, I'm curious about it. I think the challenge I've run into is mostly when I see people have a One Piece video, I mostly assume that's going to be a video for people who are already fans who are already reading it.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I'm going to really be the target audience for that kind of content. That's usually how I interpret that.
Very
But
true.
with Red Rising, I was also going to ask Becca, have you read on past the first trilogy? Are you a fan of all the Red Rising books? Okay, all of them. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. The last one, I sobbed. Like,
Oh.
oh, I just don't even want to think
Becca,
about it. It's very upsetting.
to be fair, Becca sobs at everything. Like
I sobbed at
Thrown a Glass,
nothing.
Thrown a
Nothing.
Glass, Crescent City,
It's two books.
anything Sarah J. Maas puts out.
Yeah, I sobbed at how bad House of Flame and Shadow was.
It was pretty bad. It
Was
was
that the
pretty
second
bad,
book in
yeah.
the trilogy?
No, it was the last
The last
one.
one? Oh no, was it bad?
It's really bad. It's really
Oh no. I knew you both
You
read
know
it.
what? Yeah,
Go for
coming
it.
from Becca though, Becca who like rides or dies for like Sarah J. Maas for so long. She's one of the reasons why I even started reading Sarah J. Maas. It's like I feel bad if because Becca gave House of Sky and Breath 4 stars, even though Becca admits she doesn't really like it all that much. And I'm like, okay, so if Becca gives anything less than 5 stars to an SGM book, you know it's not that good. So I also feel heartbroken that Becca didn't love the last book. Like I feel betrayed myself. And I'm not that big a fan of Sarah J. Maas myself. So
Yeah.
it's just
So
not good.
wow. Can you tell us in a spoiler-free way?
There's no stakes. It gets a bit sci-fi, but in a really weird way that doesn't make any sense. Everything's really convenient. One character is off on their own. Like, everyone's trying to save the world, and one character is focused on this one thing. But it's like watching an anxiety spiral where everything he touches, he makes worse. And then he tries to fix the thing he makes worse and then makes something else worse again. And that's like half of the book. The end was just too easy, considering it was supposed to be like an epic battle. The writing wasn't very good. The characters were acting out of character. That's probably not it.
Oh wow.
Pretty much like
That's a lot
everyone's
because I know you're a big fan. Yeah.
yeah, but when everyone's powerful, no one's powerful. You know what I mean? It's like she was trying to make every single person powerful, and it's like, okay, then what's the cutoff? What's it's she wasn't very good at the magic system of where it went, essentially.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So the first book was probably the favorite for you three and for you two?
Yeah, it's the first book's my favorite book of all time.
Oh wow.
But the
Wow.
rest of the series is not great.
Wow.
That's so sad. I feel bad for anyone who has a favorite book and the rest of the series is not great. For me, that was Finley Donovan. I loved the first Finley Donovan book so much. And like the first Finley Donovan book was in my favorite books of 2022. And then the third Finley Donovan book was in my worst books of 2023. It's like, it's so interesting how a book series can just completely fall off when maybe the first one is like one of your favorite books ever. It's just so gutting. It's like one of the most heartbreaking things. I've never experienced heartbreak in terms of like a relationship or anything. So my heartbreak comes from being let down by books, essentially, or book series.
I
So
That
don't
is
think
the
there's anything
saddest thing.
worse than a disappointing sequel when the first book is strong. Like I've just started Children of Blood and Bone by Tommy Adeyemi, and so far, like I really like it. I'm not very far in, but I know that nobody really likes the sequel.
I've heard
So it's
that.
kind of like I'm setting myself up for
failure.
disappointment.
But then
You
you
could
might
just treat it
love
as a
it though. That's the thing as
standalone.
well.
I
Oh,
But you
could,
might
I
love it.
potentially, I do. My favorite first books in series are ones that can be read as standalones, where they leave a little bit that can be developed in like the later books, but the main plot of that one book is wrapped up. So maybe I could do that. And the third book's coming out this year, so I could see what people think about that and if they don't like that either. Because I'm willing to read a bad book too if book 3 is good.
yeah.
Mm.
Gavin, you're getting some love.
Thanks.
I remember getting chills with the first Crescent City with the whole lighted up scene. It's sad how mass has fallen. Oh, how sad. So I honestly did read that book when it came out, and it just wasn't for me. Sadly, it just wasn't my
No,
thing.
that's fair.
I'm just not a mass. I think if I don't know. Yeah, just mass has not really worked for me
She's
so far.
I feel like she's very popcorn entertainment sometimes. Like you kind of feel like, okay, she's not the best and like it's not the best world building or anything like that, but sometimes you can just like have fun with what
Yeah.
she gives you, which is what I found with some of her other stuff. But yeah, I just like sometimes you can like overlook a lot as long as you're having fun with what you're reading. But there's only so much we can take as readers, you know, like there's only so much that we can give leniency to when it comes to some of our favorite authors too.
I'm not
Yeah,
even going to defend her because I'm mad about book 2 and 3 of Crescent City.
Wow. Oh wow. That's sad.
it's so personal.
I used to think
Yeah.
that her plot work was very good, and I thought that she was very good at giving you characters that you can root for. They can be a little bit repetitive across series and like the kind of writing that she uses. But I always really liked it. And then with the last 3 books, so ACOTAR 6, 5 as well. So the last 2 Crescent City books and the last ACOTAR book, I don't think have been to her usual standard. I can tell you what I don't like about them, but I couldn't tell you why they feel so completely different from anything that she's written before and why they're just not as good. Um, but yeah, they're not up to the usual what I would expect from her.
Yeah. Are you a bigger Throne of Glass fan or ACOTAR fan at this point, given the disappointment of that last ACOTAR book?
If we talk about ACOTAR as a trilogy, because like the latest ACOTAR book, I think that the character development of Nesta is amazing. And I really like the relationship between Nesta and Cassian, which is like the main romance. But it's just alongside that, normally with Sarah J. Maas, we have an epic plot, and the plot in that book feels so small compared to what you'd expect from her. So that's like my issue with that book. But I think if we talk about ACOTAR as like the original trilogy, I think that ACOTAR is a stronger series, and I think that Throne of Glass is a better journey. So I like both of them for different things, I feel. But I
Oh,
would say
okay.
at this point, Throne of Glass is probably my favorite series from her. But House of Earth and Blood is my favorite book.
Yeah. Okay. Ah, that's so sad. I'm so sorry for you guys.
I
The Crescent
know
City thing
it's
didn't
sad.
work out. That's too
I was
bad.
never really that big into it. I remember I read the very first Throne of Glass book and then I read the very last Throne of Glass book. I didn't read any of them in between. I wasn't really that bothered by it. Akatar was just, I got caught up in the booktube hype because I started reading it like 2020. And then, yeah, Crescent City was just along for the ride kind of thing too. So I'm good. I don't think I actually have any other authors that I feel betrayed by other than, you know, the Finley Donovan books, and that's probably about it. I'm pretty good with not holding authors accountable sometimes for me falling out of love with series. But when it comes to certain popular authors, I think they have a certain thing about them that as soon as they start to lose that, I feel like, oh, I don't know. I like with Sarah J. Maas, I'm just like, I can't do that anymore. I'm sorry.
I felt that way with Sanderson, honestly.
Oh,
Unpopular opinion
really?
here.
Oh,
With the Stormlight Archive, yeah, I mean, this is a kind of unpopular opinion, but I personally enjoyed Way of Kings quite a bit. And then Words of Radiance, I get why it's people's favorite of the series. For some reason, it didn't quite hit that high for me as the first book. And then 3 was okay, but I started to feel like I wasn't feeling the stakes as much with that book, and then 4, I really did not care for certain things in that book. The
I
story.
haven't
Becca
read
is
4 yet.
shocked.
I haven't read 4 yet because I got hung up on Mistborn Era 2, which I really do not like,
Oh, I
and
don't like his
so
I don't like that trilogy.
it
Mhm.
took me so long to get through it that I haven't read Rhythm of War yet, so I'm about to start rereading Stormlight next month. I've just started Bands of Morning, which is the third Mistborn Era 2 book, but Oathbringer is my favourite. I
Ah,
don't
nice.
love Way of Kings, but I'm excited to read it again because I said when I read it, I feel like this book is going to be 10 out of 10 when you reread it. But the amazing thing about Stormlight, which obviously I know that you know, is that you don't know anything about it when you start reading it because the
Mhm.
characters don't know anything about their world. So because they don't question anything, they take everything on face value. And because they don't question it, nothing is explained to us because the readers aren't saying like, "Oh, not the readers, the characters aren't saying like, "What's this weird thing?" So nobody ever explains it. And as the series go on, the characters learn that their world is actually like has some weird things going on in it, and we learn along with the characters about the world. So when you start Way of Kings, it has like 2 or 3 false starts and you don't have a clue what's happening
Yeah.
until you get like deep into Words of Radiance. So when you reread it, it'll make sense, but on first read it doesn't. But who's your
Yeah.
favorite Stormlight character?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I don't know if I really have one, honestly.
None
It
of them.
probably was when I was reading it, probably Kaladin, but I never so I liked Kaladin when I read it,
Hmm.
but at the same time, I never felt like maybe because 'cause I'm a little bit older, I never felt like, "Oh, Kaladin!" Like, I like, I never crushed on
Yeah.
Kaladin, so it always felt
Oh,
a little
I
weird to me.
it's Adolin for me.
Ah, you know
I
what?
love Adolin.
Adolin's I wasn't super crazy about Adolin mostly because of the humor that's employed with his
Mm,
character that I wasn't super a fan I'm not a big fan of Sanderson's humor in that series. It but at the same time, somebody brought there have been some friends, like one friend, my friend, Laura from Fantasy Wash brought up such a good point recently about how Adolin is such a loyal character. When she started to explain his loyalty, it started to soften me up to him when I thought about him that way. So I could see why he would be a favorite character in some ways.
I love I'm a sucker for a pretty boy that has character growth, which I feel like
Ah,
is Adolin's like pretty shallow to start off with.
he
And like
is.
he grows a lot with the series
That's a
and
good
I just
point.
love that for him.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, for me, I like what you were saying though about the characters learning. We learn about the world through the characters learning about the world. That's actually a
Mhm,
really good point. I think it's neat that he does that in that series while at the same time each book gives you a flashback to a specific character. So you learn backstories of a character at
mhm,
the same time. So you
yeah.
learn what they know that you don't know yet too. So that's kind of clever. I hope you enjoy it though, Gavin. Have you read it? Any Stormlight books yet?
I read, is it The Way of Kings? Yeah, I have read The Way of
You
Kings.
read Wave Kings?
Yeah, this was back in like November 2020. It's funny as well because this was when I was a little bit all over the place. I actually read it for a Gilmore Girls readathon. Like it was like the most, yeah, exactly. Like why did I do that?
You
So like
quite
nobody
alright.
knows I read it. Yeah, nobody knows I read it because I was just in a strange place then. But no, I read the first Way of Kings book and that was my I liked it, but I can't really remember too much about it, to be honest. It was one of the reasons why I think I kind of didn't want to explore too much adult fantasy at the time because I thought I've read all of these pages and I barely retained anything. Did I just waste my time? I at the time I was enjoying reading it, but I feel like wow, I my memory must be terrible because it just didn't stick. So I
I
kind of
think
avoided it for a while.
it will be you won't have had a lot of context because a lot of it doesn't make
Mm.
sense. So that might be why you haven't remembered anything because you have no context to attach it to.
That is
Yeah,
such a
because I
good
did
point,
know
Becca.
I I
Yeah.
I don't think it is like Brandon Sanderson's writing for me because I liked it. But I did read Skyward,
Yeah.
the
Skyward,
YA one.
yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I really enjoyed that. So I do like his writing, but yeah, you must be right. It might have just been the context of it. I just kind of
Mhm.
went all in during a really random time, and it didn't stick. It really didn't stick.
I
So
think
yeah, I also say Rory Gilmore reading it.
Sanderson can be quite hit or miss to me because I know somebody's just said that they didn't like the humor in Tress. I really struggle with his YA because I feel like he dumbs down his writing and like has a like really jovial tone in his YA, which I think is really unnecessary because if you break down Sanderson's like books and writing style, his writing is perfectly accessible. It's the complexity of his magic system and his plot that's
Mm.
really hard to get your head around. So for YA, all he needs to do is have a less complex and intricate magic system and plot. Like he doesn't need to dumb down his writing, and that really frustrates me with his YA. I really liked Skyward. Actually, I hated the character in it, but I really liked her growth, so I liked her by the end of the first book. But then I hated that book two was just a repeat of the first book with the same characters. And at this point, I'm really struggling to find the motivation to continue.
Yeah, I did not like Starsight, the second book in the Skyward series, so
Mm,
I just quit the series after that, but I loved Skyward. I
yeah,
honestly
I think
loved
I
it.
might unhaul the rest of the books and just keep Skyward.
Yeah.
Pretend
Yeah.
it's a
It can
standalone, yeah.
it can be read as a standalone.
It can
Yeah.
be. That's how I read it. That's what I consider it now. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not continuing this series. And I'll be honest, like I've had that issue with them for whatever reason with a lot of YA series where and I don't know what it is, where I love book one and then book two, I'm like, I think I
Mm,
could have done with this being a standalone or a
Mm.
duology or
yeah.
something. So yeah, that was kind of my issue with Skyward, but I think for me, one of the big things that there are a lot of things actually that kind of started to get grate on me a little bit with Stormlight, with Sanderson's writing. And I'll say this: I have read a lot of Sanderson. Like I read all of Mistborn Era One, the first three books in Era Two, Skyward, Starsight, Warbreaker, the first four books in Stormlight. I already mentioned the novellas in Stormlight, but I just got burned out because I read all of those in 2020, and at the end of the year, I
Oh,
was like, I just can't anymore."
yeah, I
But I
read
think
Well,
Elantris in, I think, 2018, and then I read Mistborn Era 1 maybe in 2020, and now, like, I still haven't reread anything from the Cosmere, so it's been, like, steadily over years, like, I've been reading Sanderson.
that's good. Yeah, I think steadily is good. For me, it would have been better. I think at the same time, I'm gonna pick up Stormlight 5 when it comes out, but I will I don't know if I'll be picking it up immediately, but I will pick it up. The thing with the hard magic system though, like I got tired. I got tired of the hard magic.
I love hard magic systems.
Oh, I don't. I think
wa-
Yeah,
I've
was
tired
this
myself out.
was there something about bronze or something in The Way of Kings? Was there something to do with bronze
that's
There
in the
are
magic
Mistborn.
system? Is
oh,
that
I think
Mistborn?
Yeah.
that's Mistborn Metals. Yeah.
Oh, metals, yes. That's it. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm just not a hard magic girly, but I can but he's very good at employing it into the story for sure.
I love things that are for me. I like my contemporary to be wildly unrealistic and dramatic. So if I'm reading a contemporary romance, I want it to be like angsty and dramatic and people breaking up every 10 minutes for no reason. But if I read fantasy, I want it to seem very realistic. So a hard magic system for me really grounds it in reality because you can believe that within that world, these things could actually happen. So that's why I love hard magic systems because I need to believe the story. And if I don't believe it, then I don't like it.
That makes sense. Yeah. No, I think that you're absolutely right. You're onto something with that. Like I still need, even though I'm a little more, I'm definitely more soft magic. I
Mhm.
still need magic to have consequences. I
Yeah,
still needed to
Mm,
have
yeah.
some area of grounding. So, like for example, I
Yeah.
loved the Winter Night trilogy by Catherine
I
Arden. I
love
thought it
that.
was
That's one of my favorite series.
beautiful series, beautiful. At the same time, my one criticism with that series, I felt like the magic was a little too, if you wish for it enough, it'll happen. Like
Yeah.
it felt a little too extreme on that end for me.
Hmm.
But I still loved the writing, and I still thought it was a beautiful story.
Yeah. That was the series that made me realize that I like historical fantasy because I
Mm,
don't like historical fiction. I find it so boring. And I have like no interest in it. But historical fantasy, I love, especially if it's a time period that I don't know very much about. So I really liked that because I don't know anything about is it 14th or 15th century Russia? No
yeah.
idea. I read one called The Embroidered Book, which I know a lot of people didn't like, but I did. That is set around the French Revolution, and it's about Marie Antoinette and her sisters, but like if they had magic. So everything plays out historically as it did. Like she still gets beheaded, but which I don't think is a spoiler because Marie Antoinette gets beheaded, like that happened.
Oh.
Um, but there's like magic and like different magical factions involved. And it's about the relationship between the sisters more than anything.
Yeah, that's
But then I
cool.
read like Divine Rivals, which is essentially a World War I romance masquerading as a fantasy romance. And war era stuff isn't for me because like in the UK, like we learn about World War I and II real young, and it's the main thing that we learn about. So I don't feel like reading war fiction is really offering me much that I don't already really know.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel
Mm,
like there's so much fiction, especially about World War II out there, like
Oh
so
yeah.
yeah.
much historical fiction, a lot. So
Like I
tales and
recently read The Book Thief and I expected to have some sort of like transcendent experience because everybody loves it so much.
Mhm.
But historical fiction just isn't for me, and so I didn't enjoy it very much.
Yeah,
I do
I get
try still as well. I try. I'm like, because I do really want to like certain genres, like historical, and I do try so hard. And sometimes it just doesn't work, but I never rule it out. Never rule it out. I've never read The Book Thief, but it sounds like one of those ones that I feel like yeah, it's one of those culturally pretty important and popular books. So maybe one day I'll try it.
I don't know if at this point we've moved past The Book Thief. You know, like how some books, like
Mm.
Earthsea, at the time was revolutionary, but now it's not. Like if you read it now, not knowing how old it is, you'd be like, this is pretty basic, pretty boring. I don't know if The Book Thief is kind of like that, whereas literature has moved on so much that
Mm.
because it's so acclaimed, you expect more from it than you actually get with all of the knowledge of the past like 20 years of literature under your belt.
Mhm.
True. So I need to kind of give some grace to some of the older stuff. I know me and Becca tried to read the Earthsea books a few years back, and we just didn't really vibe with it too well. I would love to still give it a go because, like what Becca said before, like ages ago too, about wanting to see the roots of fantasy
Mm.
and see like how it's grown since then. And I feel like Earthsea is one of the ones that is just like so important to that. So yeah, I would also love to try and give some like grace to those older ones where I'm like, yeah, I totally appreciate that this started it all or it contributed to what it is today. It's like I love gothic fiction and I always recommend the ones that are some of my favorites, like Anne Radcliffe, who wrote The Italian and The Mysteries of Udolpho back in like 1790. Like she is one of the pioneers of the entire genre. But I feel like if people try to read her stuff now, they wouldn't like it as much as I do because I read it before I really got into gothic fiction. So it's kind of like it's like I feel like all of us as readers, we have read like say when you started reading adult fantasy, Joanna, like you probably what you read then you probably won't love as much because your palette has just gotten so much vaster and you know more about what you do enjoy in the field and how far that's come. So I honestly, yeah, I try and be so lenient with stuff from a bit further back so that I can still enjoy it.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, I always wanna, like, give myself space to come back around to, even if I phase out of liking something too. So, like, for
Yeah.
example, I told you about how I'm actually on a Sanderson diet right now because I got burnt out, but at the same time, I don't wanna rule out the idea that I could like it again, you know?
Mm.
But it is interesting how that can change your taste over time,
I
for sure.
actually really don't like it because I it's the last 2 years now. In my best books of the year video, there is hardly any fantasy because I
Mhm.
rate fantasy 5 stars so rarely because I
Oh,
read so much of it that
yeah.
unless it like really impresses me or does something amazing, it's just not cutting it anymore because of how much fantasy I've read. So I don't know whether it's
Yeah.
me maybe not choosing the best books or whether it is because I've read so much fantasy that it's just not doing what it needs to be 5 stars. But then I'll read a thriller and I'll give it 5 stars because I don't read thrillers all the time. So they still have space to like impress me and shock me. Whereas a lot of fantasy, I'll be like, well, you've mentioned this on page 10. So on page 250, that's going to come back. And like, I just,
Yeah. Yeah,
and
you've trained your brain too much.
do you think that's
It could be,
That's
yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
probably why I change so much on BookTube. It's why I love I'm not the same every single year. I change what I read because I do feel like I get myself stuck in a rut a little bit, and I
Mm,
read the same things over and over. And then I get to that last book, and I'm like, you know what? If I had read that first before everything else, I probably would have loved it. But because
mm.
I've read so much of this genre, so much of this kind of book, I don't think I love it because I've dulled myself to it. So that's why I'm constantly. We need to keep changing things. We need to keep changing it up. So
But then
Yeah.
I
sometimes I
totally
do
get
think
that.
it's the books that I'm reading because I'll read a book sometimes and I'll be like, this is 5 stars, or like the writing and this is amazing. Because sometimes I feel like I gaslight myself into thinking that I'm the problem when it's actually the books that I'm picking up just aren't that good,
Mm.
maybe.
No, I wonder if
Like
I do that.
I picked up Children of Blood and Bone, like literally today, and already I'm like the writing in this is good. And I feel like
Wow.
Yeah.
whereas 95% of the books I read, I start them and I'm like 70 pages in and I'm like, this is all right.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I do feel
Yeah.
like I need to DNF even more than I currently do. I had the same feeling with We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faisal as well. Like I immediately started that and was like, I really like this.
Yeah. How do you figure out what to read, Becca? Like what informs your TBR the most? I know you have a lot of
Not
books
for
on your
Goblin
shelf
anymore.
It's
and you
not
have
for
a book.
coffee anymore, no. So I
Oh,
have 2 book clubs every month. I have a Patreon fantasy romance book club, and then I'm either reading something for Wheel of Time or First Law. I have a Patreon pick that I do every month where my top tier patrons like recommend me books. So that's like my base every month is like those 3 books. And then I tend to do themed vlogs. And I know we were talking before about how Gavin does a lot of themed vlogs and like I can't commit to them because essentially when something's on my TBR, I don't want to read it anymore. I even have like a book cart here that has like arcs and stuff that like I didn't read in time. So it's a if you have time, prioritize this. But because it's on the cart, I'm never going to read it. So the way that I keep myself motivated to make content and also to read, and I don't even want to tell you how instantaneous the switch is in my motivation to read. I do themed reading vlogs, but I randomize the books that I read, so I don't know what they are until the second I pick them up. So I've just started a new series on my channel called Shelve It or Scrap It, where I have in this corner here, I've got like 70 books stacked, and by the end of the year, they're on the shelves, or I need to do a massive reorganization and unhaul them. And I randomize the books that I read for that. So it will be one of those 70 books, but I don't know which book it's going to be. And it's like if I do a themed vlog, if I do like second chance authors, I'll just collect all of them and then like maybe randomize which one it is. Or like in November, I read only subscription box books, but I pulled out of a jar which theme the vlog was going to be. So like, would it be YA fairy loot books? Would it be how much can I read in 24 hours? To kind of keep it fresh, because if I know what I'm going to read, I don't want to. So I know, Gavin, you were saying like you plan things so far in advance because you're excited about the concept, but when you start doing it, you don't want to. I plan mine out so far in advance, but I don't allow myself to pick the books because if I pick the books, then I don't want to read them. Whereas if I find a way to make it more random, so I don't know what I'm reading until I read it, then I'll actually make the video.
that's
It
Almost like
amazing.
a
motivates me
surprise.
to read as well, not knowing what I'm going to read next, because then I get excited about figuring out what I'm going to read next.
It's such a complex system that Becca, like
I
really
know.
complex.
It's
I
just
like it though.
my
Yeah.
life is a series of systems that trick my brain into doing what I want it to do.
No
So
fair.
does that allow for any mood reading since you're using a number generator? I guess I'm
I
trying to understand.
actually, I've said this before. I don't know if I know how to want to read something.
Ah,
Because like I have like if I have finished my TBR, I'll be like, okay, well, what sequels do I need to read? Or like if there's no sequels, I'd be like, do I have any arcs that I need to catch up on? Like I go through systems of like categories of things like that I could maybe read. I never just want because I feel like I might want to read books, but I want to read these 10 books equally and I don't want to read any one more than the other.
yeah.
And then like should I be prioritizing new things or old things? As you can tell, I have a lot of anxiety.
No, that's
Yeah.
wow.
It
That's
makes sense
amazing.
though, especially with like how big our TBRs end up getting and how
Mm.
many times we do get books, we buy books, and we we can't read as fast as we get books, or we can't read as fast as books come out. And it's so great to see so many amazing books get released. I love it. But at the same
Mm.
time, I'm like, I really wish more books sounded bad because then I wouldn't be inclined to pick it up. But there's so many great concepts, so many great books. We don't have the time for all of them, unfortunately. But I also really do love the Shelve It or Scrap It because it's just such a good concept. It's like you really do have to like prioritize and you cut out the stuff that isn't gonna do it for you.
It's
Becca
also good
loves
as
steak.
well because
That's what I've
it's a mix.
decided.
Yeah, yeah, she does.
She loves
It's a
She
steak.
mix
does.
of reading like newer stuff because most of the things in that stack are like newer books. It also like makes me read from my shelves and like assess what's on my shelves and what maybe I don't need anymore. Spoiler
Mm.
alert, I have started filming episode 2, and if you guys watched episode 1, episode 2 is going better. Like this is
Oh.
not just endless DNFs. So
Oh, good.
it's going a little bit better. We've got some
Oh,
of the variety that I wanted from episode 1 that never happened.
yeah. What about you, Gavin? How do you choose your TBR? Is it mostly just what kind of vlog I'm gonna I want to make, and
So
then
yeah, so pretty much, yeah. I always love. I mean, this is gonna sound ridiculous, but sometimes I have like a year in advance of the content I want to make and the kind of videos I want to do. So I've already got video plans for January 2025. Like, I've got things that I really do look
wow,
forward to, and I just kind of base a lot of it on that. But I was treating myself really poorly in terms of reading what I want to read for the past year and a half. Instead, I was really bogging myself down in doing all of these like project kind of videos, series reads, and stuff like that. So now that I am a lot more nicer to myself, I am really picking things that I'm genuinely so anticipating that I'm gonna love. I'm trying so hard to like narrow it down though. That's still really hard to do. But I look at a book and if I look at that book and I think, you know, I just want to read you right now. And I did that with my the vlog that I started today. I was literally just looking at my bookshelves and I was like, oh, what do I really fancy reading? Oh, you. And I want to read you kind of thing. I would love to, and I don't know if you guys would ever do this either, but I would love to list every book I have in order of, and I know Becca just said, oh, she doesn't like prefer one or the other, but to kind of order it all in, I want to read this the most to want to read this the least kind of thing.
Gavin, I
Like,
have
I really want to do
600
that.
books. I've got 600 books that I haven't read, and you want me to tier
Oh,
rank them all based on how much I want
yes.
to read them?
I would, you know, I'd love it if both of you guys did it because I think it would be so, it would really prioritize
I
then
don't
if
know
you
if
actually had a list.
that video would be long, and I don't know if it would be long in the kind of way where people watch it, or whether people are like, "This is the most tedious thing I've ever
Well,
watched in my life."
maybe just the top 10 and
interesting.
then the bottom 10. Top 10 and bottom 10. And then at least then you know exactly structurally what you really genuinely want to read more than anything
But then
else.
that bottom 10, you might as well just unhaul them.
Well, exactly. That's why you need to do it because then you can really see what's on your shelves that you don't actually want to read. I feel like just looking at them now, the mess that they are, I can't see what I would just want to unhaul. I find unhauls so hard. But if we like tier ranked it and you saw the bottom 10, you'd be like, okay, well, yeah, I definitely should unhaul those because apparently I don't want to read them. But until you see it, I don't think you know you don't want to read them, you know, unless you
I
have a list.
I accidentally took a book off my shelf and put it in my unhaul pile, and it's one that I've been dithering about unhauling for ages. I think I took it down
Mm.
and then put it down, and then thought it should be in my unhaul pile and put it there, then realized I had a gap in my shelves. But now that it's in
Mm.
my unhaul pile, I'm fine to unhaul it. It was the decision of putting it in there that was a problem. But now that I've seen it there and I'm like, oh, I'm unhauling that book. That's fine. I don't want it.
Yeah. Exactly. You don't know
I feel
until you
like I
do
could
it. Like, you know
unhaul
what I mean?
half.
It's like,
If I did a brutal unhaul, I feel like I could get my
mm,
TBR down to like 300 books easily.
These all sound like
yeah.
really fun video concepts, like brutal unhaul or ranked to unhaul, or I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
just finding these
Like,
fun.
But the
I
pain of
love
unhauling
that.
300 books,
Yeah, it would be pain to begin with, but what's the point of having them? You know, if you're not going to realistically read them, or they're in the bottom
but I haven't
10% of the
accepted
books
the
that you own.
reality that I'm not going to read them yet.
That is the hard part, isn't it? I just watched a video
Yeah.
yesterday where the person was saying, "Look at all the books on your shelf. Chances are you're probably not going to read them all before you die." And I'm like, What? I can't think that way.
I
I
could, if
know.
I didn't
I
buy
know.
a book for 6 years, then I could get through my TBR.
Yeah, that's a long time. And so many great things come out in that time. So you're like, oh. But what about you, Joanna? How do you pick?
Oh, buddy reads. Usually, because I
Buddy
have so
reads?
many buddy reads
Buddy
going
reads?
on, or buddy reads, or I guess what I've been doing the last couple of years, I always have like a series TBR, and so some of
Mm.
my series TBRs, some of the series I am buddy reading, and then I have a list of standalones, and some of those I'm also buddy reading. I'm trying to not overcommit on those things, but yeah, those largely inform. And then I also look at series that I'm reading, and like if I have any ongoing series, try to close those out. Otherwise, I love picking up books on a whim too. Like I don't know
Mm,
what it is. I find so it's interesting because when I started before I started my channel, I actually read a lot of other genres than just fantasy, or I read a lot of different stuff, I think. And then when I started a channel, it just naturally, organically turned into like adult fantasy. That's what I focus on. And it just, I don't know why. It was my mood that year. That's most of what I read. And then over time, what I realized is like the next year, I kept on picking up books on a whim. And then my top 10 books of that year, it turned out like most of them, actually, the last couple of years, a lot of my top 10 books were not fantasy at all.
Mhm.
So, I don't know. But I find that like reading other genres actually makes me more excited to pick up fantasy when I pick up fantasy, oddly. So,
mm.
I don't really know. I sometimes it's usually just booktube though. I get influenced by what people are talking about, and if I have a pretty good strong sense I'm going to love a book, then I'll pick it up.
Yeah, that's true. And I do. I love that so much because I really do want to try and be more like conscious of what my mood is, and if I do just want to pick up a book on a whim, then I should allow myself to do that. But I conditioned myself for so long that if I don't have a video concept or I can't make a video out of it, then I can't read it. But I'm only just getting out of that mindset. So, like
Yeah.
recently, I just did a horror novellas vlog, and like I still had to make a theme, I still had to do something, but I only did that vlog then because I fancied horror novellas. I was like, you know what, this week I really do fancy horror novellas, so I'm going to read horror novellas and I'll do the vlog. So I definitely got better with allowing myself to do things but still making a video out of it if I possibly can.
Smart though. That's so smart. I really
Mhm.
wish I were organized enough to do themed videos like that, even if they're not vlogs. I love themed videos, like the whole concept of doing that. But yeah, my reading has just been all over the place lately. So you're talking about Gothic, like my next video, if I can get it edited, because I just have been lazy and putting it off. I talk about Rebecca by Du Maurier, so a
Oh, that's
Gothic
one of my
book.
favorite books. I love that
It's
book.
so good. It was so, so good. So Rebecca by Du Maurier, and then this literary fiction blended fantasy book called The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell, which was
Oh,
amazing. Loved
okay.
it.
I
But
have some David Mitchell that I haven't read yet, and I just feel like David Mitchell is an author that I won't like. And I think it's
oh,
because he's so popular, and I don't
yeah.
tend to read like popular authors like that, you know, like mass market aimed at the general public kind of books.
Yeah.
But I have like 3 David Mitchell books that I need to try because at this point it's like if I don't read them, I need to unhaul them because I've had them so long.
Yeah.
But it's yeah, that I really like the cover for the Bone Clocks as well, so I'm glad to hear
I
you like.
love the cover of that. Yeah. Yeah, I loved
Not
that
seen it.
book. I loved it. I think it's kind of a tricky sell, that particular book, because
Mhm.
there are fantasy things that happen, but that they're not explained up front, and then it gets explained really fast at the end. That's the
Oh, okay.
only thing that I think is not gonna work for a lot of fantasy readers. But if you like but what I loved about it was like the slice of life stuff, because I tend to love slice of life stuff, which I know a lot of people find boring, but I loved
Mhm.
the characters in that book. I just loved it. So,
I can't wait for
um
this video now then, because I do love Gothic. Is it those two books? Is there any more?
well,
Or
no, there are a couple of other ones, but it's like
mm,
they don't really match up theme-wise. Like they have nothing in common. That's what I'm saying. Is like I'm putting
it-
books together that have no commonality except for no, they don't have any commonality, Gavin. That's my
and that's
problem.
and that's
So I'm like,
and that's
That's
fine.
fine.
I love that so much because you can just talk about it and we're just gonna eat it up anyway. Like I'm really looking forward to
"Aw,
this video.
thank you.
I also really enjoyed Rebecca a lot.
Aw,
So
it's
Oh,
so
did you?
good." Such a brilliant book.
I love any
Have
book
you
with
guys
Rebecca in the
seen
title.
Have you guys seen the Hitchcock movie,
The what?
Rebecca?
Oh,
No,
I haven't.
no,
No,
I
have you seen it?
no.
The
Oh,
Netflix
it's
one?
it's one of my favorite movies. It's really good. I used to watch all black and white Hitchcock films with my mum, and that one is
Mm.
my favorite. It's
Oh,
really good.
Hitchcock. It's a Hitchcock movie?
Yeah.
Oh, I have to
I
check that
haven't
out.
seen the Netflix one, the adaptation that they did recently, because I just like I love the Hitchcock one so much. I don't want to
Okay.
see like a new
You
Yeah,
version
just
of
won't
it.
like it.
I was scared about the Netflix one. I didn't know about the Hitchcock one, so I'm gonna have to look that
Mhm.
up. But as soon as I finish the book, I'm like, I just want to see Manderley, and I just want to see Manderley
Mm.
now, like a real depiction of Manderley, the Manderley estate in that book.
The
But
fact that it's like black and white as well really adds to the drama, and like because the movie was made so long ago, like I feel like it's really good for the atmosphere of Rebecca.
oh, that sounds awesome. Yeah, because that's the one issue is that like I looked up the Netflix adaptation trailer. I don't have a Netflix account right now, but I looked
Mhm.
up the trailer and it was not saying this is a bad thing. I'm okay with modern adaptations doing different modern things, but it was so sexy looking, and I'm like, "This is
Mm.
not a sexy book."
Yeah.
It was just so strange. I was like it just felt almost like it was
Yeah,
trying too hard. I don't know.
a lot of the modern adaptations of great books from back then or even before that just kind of miss the mark a little bit on the heart of what it is that they're trying to portray. Like, for example, Persuasion by Jane Austen. I really enjoyed the book. I really like the book Persuasion. And then there was a Netflix adaptation 2 years ago with, I can't remember her name, but she is recently in Madam Web. She was in 50 Shades of Grey. Oh, Dakota Johnson. Is
Yeah.
it Dakota Johnson?
Oh.
Yeah,
Maybe.
there was a Netflix adaptation of Persuasion, and they made it into something that, I do like adaptations when they do creative things with it and they do their own thing, but it just totally missed the mark on what Persuasion actually was in terms of the characters, Vipress, in terms of like the characters and like the heart of the story. And it was just like, what is this? Like, this isn't Persuasion. And like, again, like it can be creative with it and change things, but yeah, I just can't vibe with a lot of modern adaptations because of that. But for like on another side of that, say, is it, like 10 Things I Hate About You is
The
retelling of
Taming of the
a
Shrew.
shape, The Taming of
Yeah.
the Shrew, which is it's a great film. And it did something so totally creative. And yeah, like Clueless is a great adaptation of Emma because it does its own thing. It makes it so modern, but like
I
it
didn't
keeps
know
the
it was
heart
a
of,
retelling of Emma. Oh, wow.
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
it's
Um,
like honestly, it's so different. It's so different, but I feel like it keeps like in
isn't
line with the
the
themes
Lion King a retelling as well of a
of
Shakespeare play?
yeah, of Hamlet. Yeah,
Yeah.
Lion King is
Never
Hamlet.
thought
Yeah,
about that. Dang. I
yeah.
didn't realize
But
this is blowing my mind.
they do
Go
so
ahead,
many
sorry.
creative things, but because, like, say, for example, that Persuasion one that came out a few years ago, and maybe Rebecca as well on Netflix, maybe they're just like, they say the wrong things sometimes, so it doesn't really resonate with book readers. Maybe it's good as a standalone movie if you don't care about the book side of things. But yeah, I just sometimes they miss the mark completely.
I
I
think modernizing classics is a great idea in terms of like 10 Things I Hate About You was it 99 and Shakespeare was he 1600s,
Yeah,
1400s. So like there's
yes.
a lot you can do with modernizing that, but modernizing Rebecca from 1920s to
38. Yeah.
38 to 2020s isn't doing much apart from making it more explicit. Like it's
Mhm.
not it's just not different enough. You're not changing because they're not changing it. Like 10 Things I Hate About You changes the setting, like almost the plot, but just follows like the key themes. Whereas that is just retelling the story, but changing very minor things about it. So it's not true to the story, which 10 Things I Hate About You was never supposed to be true to the story of The Taming of the Shrew. But the modern adaptation of like Rebecca is supposed to be true to the text of the old movie, and it's just obviously not. And I
I
think that's
also
where they go wrong with it.
I also wonder too if like something I've thought about when it comes to that is even changing the title can help clue the audience that this is it might be inspired, but it's doing something different. So
Mhm,
not using the exact same title as Shakespeare for 10 Things I Hate About You. West Side Story, Romeo and Juliet retelling, but
mhm,
in New York,
Mhm.
but with a different title. I think that can work to like bring the
Yeah,
spirit of something in a retelling, but
yeah.
modernize it and make it really clear to the audience we're doing something different at the same time.
agree.
But Yeah, absolutely. So, Persuasion, by the way, next Jane Austen book I want to read. So I'm excited that you
Nice.
loved it.
I still not
Oh
have
yeah,
read any Austen.
You still what?
really?
I haven't read the
Hasn't
Austen
read.
yet.
Oh,
No.
I'm like, what? I read, so again, like the only reason why I read Jane Austen was because I did it all in one video, and I love doing it because I really enjoyed the books. And like Persuasion is probably one of my least favorites of Jane Austen's, but I really enjoy all of them. I think she did a great job with all of them. But I just feel like her other ones are just like better, but it's still really good. And Emma's my favorite Jane Austen. I love that one so much. And like Northanger Abbey is like an underrated gem. I love that one also, but it's pretty much almost everyone's least favorite Jane Austen is Northanger Abbey, but because it does the gothic and it really makes fun of Anne Radcliffe's gothic, who I love. Like she is still my favorite gothic writer. So the fact that she did that as a response to Anne Radcliffe, I see all of the things in it, and I'm just obsessed with it. But yeah, I think anyone who can read some more Jane Austen, Becca, I want to see you have a Jane Austen book on your TBR in 2024,
I'm
and
not a
hopefully you
big
guys enjoy.
classic girly, if I'm being honest,
It
but I
doesn't
do
matter.
like gothic fiction. And
oh,
I only realized that the only classics that I like are gothic, and that was something that I didn't seek out gothic fiction. I just realized of the ones that I liked and the ones that I don't like, the ones that I like are all gothic. So my next classic, when I eventually get to it, is going to be Jane Eyre, which I'm very excited about.
Oh,
ah,
nice.
nice.
Because I love
Yeah.
my favorites are Wuthering Heights and Rebecca, and I also really love The Picture of Dorian Gray. The only outlier is The Great Gatsby, which obviously isn't
Mm.
gothic.
I've only
Um,
read, yeah, I just read The Old Man and the Sea by Hemingway, and that's Hemingway, right? Yeah, Great Gatsby.
I think
I just,
no Fitzgerald.
oh, Fitzgerald. Never mind
Yeah.
then. I don't know. I always get my classic authors mixed up. But yeah,
Same, same.
so I've only read by Austen, I've only read Pride and Prejudice. I read that at the end of this year. I'm very ill-read when it comes to classics, like embarrassingly ill-read. But that book was so much fun. But it's definitely not gothic. It was more like a
Mm.
satire, comic,
I
romantic
think that's
comedy.
why that's what puts me off Jane Austen, because it's more like she writes like rom-coms, right?
Yeah, it's a
Or like
rom-com.
classic.
Yeah.
And it's not my favorite thing to read, and I feel like dealing with the fact that it's a classic and not being the most like topic that I'm interested in, I just
Yeah.
don't feel like I'm going to like Jane Austen very
Might
much.
not be the one for
That
you. Yeah.
Northanger Abbey then still might be the one because that's like a parody gothic fiction, but in itself it is a really good gothic book,
Oh,
and it has it's still gothic. It still has some like really great gothic scenes in it, and like the main character, she loves gothic fiction, and she finds herself in a sort of gothic fiction-esque setting, and she starts to see everything as like a classic gothic novel, so she gets herself all like overcome a sensibility at like terror and things happening that just it's so quintessential gothic, and it's making fun of it, but at the same time having its own kind of conversation with what gothic is. It's so good. It's literally a great Jane Austen book, and it's short.
I need
It's
to
probably
read
her
that.
shortest book.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
please do. It's so
So
good.
I'm
So
kind of
good.
dumb, and I barely learned what Gothic. I mean, I've always heard the word,
Mhm.
and I knew it was inspired by
Yeah.
the architecture of the Gothic period, but I didn't really know what defined a Gothic in literature until very recently. So I'm still very
Mhm.
new to this game. Like
I
I've read,
couldn't give you an official definition of it, but in my soul, it's about the drama. Like
Yeah.
it's about Heathcliff like flinging himself around on the moors, pining for his lost love, while like the wind's howling. Like
oh,
it's the drama.
I like
That's
that.
such a specific visual as well. Like
Yeah.
I love it though, because
And
the
there's
gothic.
also
I think
Mrs.
the gothic.
Danvers like in the window of like Mandalay.
Yes.
Nobody is
That-
more dramatic than Mrs. Danvers.
That's yeah, that's pretty dramatic. It's
Yeah.
true.
yeah. It's that's why I love the gothic. I think you can interpret it any way. The gothic means whatever it means to you. So if it's the over
Oh,
dramatization, then that's great.
I love
I feel like the atmosphere is probably my go-to
I
for
was
the
gonna say there's
gothic.
a lot of descriptions of atmosphere and like
Yeah.
dark, dreary, rainy weather in Gothic fiction. Which I mean,
Landscape is a big thing in gothic, yeah.
maybe we love it so much because we're British, so we're used to the classic
Mm,
Gothic weather. Like it's
true.
always windy and raining.
that does feel like it's. I attribute that in my mind with Gothic for sure.
Yeah.
Something about that kind of dark, stormy, atmospheric weather. Actually, there's a channel called I just discovered recently called Tristan in the Classics, I think is his name. But he did a
Oh,
wonderful video about what makes a gothic, and it had like
oh,
he had like 6 things that makes something a gothic. And he didn't refer to Rebecca once in that video, but every single thing I'm like, that's Rebecca, that's Rebecca, that's
Mhm.
Rebecca. I couldn't give you the list off the top of my head. I wrote them down at one point. Tried to refer to them in my next video, but anyhow, yeah, I was really I was like thinking, this is probably a genre I need to explore more. I probably need to pick up more gothic fiction. So Northanger Abbey, was that
mm,
what you recommended?
yeah. Oh yeah, but that's if you want to read like more Jane Austen. But my
Ah,
favorite gothic classic of all time, and I feel hesitant to recommend it because again, it's like it's a bit old, but it's fantastic. It's very dramatic. I think Becca would love it as well because it has the whole over dramatization and like oh my god, but it's The Italian by Anne
ah,
Radcliffe.
oh,
So it's like so good. It's pretty much about a girl called Elena. She gets in the eye of this guy, and the guy has a mother who hates Elena, so she gets a monk to kidnap her, and he goes on this like journey to try and save her. But there's like this whole intricate family drama thing going on as well. But it has like the most best like descriptions of like churches and the terror of the night and landscapes and just like everything you kind of want from a gothic story. I recommend it quite a bit sometimes. Like whenever I talk about gothic fiction, I recommend it, but I'm always hesitant to recommend it because the language is quite dated. But it's
oh,
still like very dramatic,
I could
so
probably still
dramatic.
get behind that. Honestly, I could probably
Yay!
get behind it.
When was
I'll
it
look it up.
published?
1797, I think it was, because I did
Oh
a
wow.
dissertation on it.
I didn't
I
need
did my
the exact
dissertation
year,
on
just
Anne
like
Radcliffe.
the rough period.
Oh, well,
Then
1790s.
then I know the scholar to get in touch with if I have questions.
Yes, if you have questions, yes, it has been 7 years since I last read it and did my dissertation on it, but it stuck with me the entire time. It's still one of my favorites, and that's why I'm a little bit hesitant to reread it because I don't want that to change. But it's just so good. I love
So
it.
are
And
you
Father
Dr.
Skidoni.
Gavin,
Oof.
by the way?
No, I only did my undergraduate. I didn't do
Oh.
anything past that, but it was a great
Oh, you did a
undergraduate.
dissertation for an
Uh,
undergraduate degree. Okay, cool.
Oh,
I
do you
yeah,
read
guys
yeah,
not do
English.
those?
No, we do just in the US, dissertations are usually associated with a doctoral degree.
Oh wow, no, we have to
Yeah.
I
do them for
wish.
undergrad as well.
Yeah, we have to do nearly every single year of my undergrad. I had to do something that was too long, almost like a dissertation. But yeah, I kind of wish that we didn't really have to. But then again, I did love writing that dissertation so much because of how much I loved the books I was writing on. So yeah, I wish I was
That's
that smart
cool.
again. I feel like I've lost all of my smartness since then. I want to
No.
retain. I want to get it back.
Well, reading definitely helps, doesn't it? I think that's always
It does.
a bonus of what we do as a hobby here.
Mm.
So, well, you
It's very
guys,
true.
I just realized that we've been going for over 3 hours, and it just flew by.
Wow.
So I was telling Gavin and Becca before we started that today is my mother's birthday. So happy birthday, Mom! If you happen to watch
Happy
this,
birthday.
Happy
and
birthday.
yay! So I do need to give her a call,
I
and
can't do that.
oh, yay, hearts! I know I could do that somehow. Let's see if I could
I
figure
don't
that
think it
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
works for
yeah.
me.
You do the heart
Oh, it's
Oh,
the
you do
thing.
camera
that.
that does it, isn't it? And my camera.
Yeah, it's a
See,
camera,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah,
There we
We've had this
go.
discussion before.
it's the Apple
Yay.
the iPhone. Yay!
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much, and thank you so much to everyone in the chat for joining us here. You all were fantastic. And just answer this question really quickly. I believe it would be. I
Mhm.
believe so.
Somebody asked about Dorian Gray as well, and that is also
I
gothic.
think it would be as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I still need
Some
to
of my
read
favorite.
that one as well. Again, very ill read when it comes to classics, something I'm trying to fix um this year, hopefully, with a little bit.
You've got a big TBR as it is, so it's fine.
Yeah, you know how it is. You all know how it is. So many books we want to read in so little time. Thank you guys
Mhm.
so much for coming here again. This was so much fun. And yeah, thank you all. And thank you, Gavin. Thank you, Becca.
Thanks for
Thank you,
having us.
Joanna, for having us.
All right. Have a great rest of your day. Bye
Bye.
bye.